Hello, horror lovers. Welcome to our channel. If you enjoy that spine-chilling sensation before bed, you're in the right place. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. This is very important to me. Like the video, and don't forget to comment which city you're watching from. Leave your comment now because you'll probably fall asleep after this story. Your support helps us continue to bring you the best horror stories. Now turn off the lights, lie down, and prepare yourself for a night of nightmares. All because I woke up to the gentle chime of my phone alarm, the soft morning light filtering through my curtains. Just another Tuesday in Los Angeles, I thought, as I reached for my phone to silence the persistent melody. That's when I saw it, and my world tilted on its axis. My heart began to race as I stared at the impossible photo on my phone, a chill creeping up my spine. There I was, curled up in my bed, clearly asleep. The angle was strange, as if someone had been standing over me. But that was impossible. I lived alone, and I certainly hadn't taken this photo myself. "What the hell?" I whispered, my voice sounding foreign in the quiet of my bedroom. I sat up quickly, scanning my room for any sign of intrusion. Everything looked normal, just as I'd left it the night before. My clothes were still draped over the chair, my laptop closed on the desk, the door firmly shut. But the photo shouldn't exist. I zoomed in, scrutinizing every detail. It was definitely me, definitely my bedroom. The timestamp showed 3:47 a.m. I racked my brain, trying to remember if I'd woken up in the night, if there was any explanation that didn't send shivers down my spine. Nothing came to mind. Panic began to set in as I jumped out of bed, my bare feet hitting the cold hardwood floor. I had to search every corner of my apartment looking for signs of intrusion. My hands shook as I flung open my closet door, half expecting someone to jump out at me. Nothing but clothes and shoes greeted me. I moved through my small apartment like a whirlwind, checking windows, looking under furniture, even examining the locks on my front door. Everything was secure. No signs of forced entry, no missing items, nothing out of place. But the knot in my stomach wouldn't ease. As I stood in my living room, trying to catch my breath, my phone buzzed with a text from my best friend, Megan. "Hey girl, still on for lunch today?" I stared at the message, my mind whirling. Should I tell her? Would she think I was crazy? I typed out a quick response. "Yeah. See you at 12. Hey, weird question. Did I send you any photos last night?" Her reply came almost immediately. "Nope, not a thing. You okay?" I hesitated before responding. "Fine, just checking. See you later." I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched as I tried to go about my day. Every small noise made me jump. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of traffic outside, the creak of floorboards as I paced my apartment. I tried to work, opening my laptop and staring at the screen, but the words blurred before my eyes. "Get it together, Olivia," I muttered to myself, running a hand through my tangled hair. I forced myself to shower and get dressed, all the while glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone standing there. By the time I left for lunch, my nerves were frayed. The bustling cafe did little to calm my anxiety. Megan took one look at me as I slid into the booth across from her and frowned. "Okay, spill. What's going on? You look like you've seen a ghost." I took a deep breath, then pulled out my phone. "I found this on my phone this morning," I said, sliding it across the table to her. "I have no idea how it got there." Megan's eyes widened as she looked at the photo. "Holy shit, Liv. That's creepy. Are you sure you didn't take it yourself? Like sleep selfie or something?" I shook my head vehemently. "No way. I was asleep. Look at the angle. Someone was standing over me." "Maybe it's an old photo," Megan suggested, though I could see the concern in her eyes. "Timestamp says last night," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. "Meg, I'm freaking out. I've checked my whole apartment. No signs of break-in, nothing missing. But someone was there. Someone was in my bedroom while I was sleeping." Megan reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Okay, let's think this through. Have you noticed anything else strange lately? Any weird noises? Things out of place? I started to shake my head, then paused. Well, now that you mention it, I've had this feeling lately, like I'm being watched. I thought I was just being paranoid, working from home too much, you know? I think you need to report this, Megan said firmly. This is serious, Liv. If someone's broken into your place once, they might do it again. The thought sent a fresh wave of panic through me. But what do I tell the police? I have no proof except this photo, which I can't even explain. It's still evidence of someone invading your privacy, Megan insisted. At the very least, they can do a proper check of your apartment, maybe increase patrols in your area. I nodded, though the idea of involving the police made this all feel too real. We managed to eat a little, though I mostly pushed my salad around the plate. As we were getting ready to leave, Megan fixed me with a serious look. Promise me you won't stay at your place alone tonight. Come crash with me and Jake, please. Part of me wanted to accept immediately, to flee my apartment and never look back. But another part of me, a stubborn, angry part, didn't want to be driven from my home by fear. Thanks, Meg, but I think I need to face this. I'll call the police when I get home, see what they say, and I'll keep my phone handy, I promise. Megan didn't look happy, but she nodded. Okay, but I'm checking in every hour, and if you don't respond, I'm calling 911. I managed a weak smile. Deal. The rest of the day passed in a blur of anxiety and paranoia. I jumped at every small noise, my skin crawling with unease. Work was impossible, my concentration shattered. I found myself staring out the window, scanning the street and nearby buildings, looking for... What? A face in a window? A camera lens glinting in the sun? As night fell, exhaustion began to set in. I'd called the police, but, as expected, they couldn't do much without more evidence. They promised to send a patrol car by later, but it did little to ease my fears. I double-checked all my locks, then crawled into bed, my body aching with tension. Sleep seemed impossible, but eventually, my eyelids grew heavy. Just as I was drifting off, I could have sworn I saw a flash of light from the building across the street, gone in an instant. My eyes flew open, heart pounding, but the window showed only darkness and the twinkling lights of the city beyond. I was about to dismiss it as my imagination when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. With trembling fingers, I reached for it, expecting another check-in text from Megan. Instead, I saw a message from an unknown number. My blood ran cold as I read the two simple words, "Sweet dreams." I dropped the phone as if it had burned me, a scream building in my throat. This was real. This was happening. And I had no idea how to stop it. My hands shook as I deleted the text, telling myself it was just a coincidence. But the words, "sweet dreams," lingered in my mind, taunting me with their sinister implication. I hadn't slept a wink since receiving that message, spending the night huddled in my bed, jumping at every creak and shadow. As dawn broke, I dragged myself out of bed, feeling like a zombie. The adrenaline that had kept me on high alert all night was wearing off, leaving me exhausted and jittery. I stumbled to the kitchen, desperate for coffee, only to freeze in the doorway. Something was off. I blinked hard, trying to focus my bleary eyes. The coffee maker was on the wrong side of the counter. I always kept it next to the sink, but now it was by the stove. It was such a small thing, but it sent a chill down my spine. I'm losing it, I muttered to myself, running a hand through my tangled hair. I must have moved it yesterday and forgotten. But as I prepared my coffee with trembling hands, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been in my apartment. I noticed other small things out of place. A book on the coffee table that I didn't remember leaving there. A chair slightly askew, my laptop open when I was sure I'd closed it the night before. My skin crawled with unease as I sipped my coffee, eyes darting around the apartment. Was I just being paranoid? Or were these signs of an intruder? I jumped as my phone buzzed, nearly spilling coffee all over myself. It was a text from my boss, Linda. "Olivia, don't forget about the client presentation at 2 p.m. Need those slides ASAP." I groaned, remembering the work I'd neglected yesterday in my panic. "Shit," I muttered, glancing at the clock. It was already 9 a.m. Forcing myself to focus, I settled at my desk with my laptop. But as I tried to work on the presentation, the walls seemed to close in on me. Every small noise made me flinch. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of a neighbor's TV, the rustle of leaves outside my window. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. After an hour of barely productive work, I slammed my laptop shut in frustration. This was impossible. How was I supposed to function like this? I paced my small living room, debating what to do. Should I call the police again? But what would I tell them? That my coffee maker had moved? That I felt like someone was watching me? They'd think I was crazy. As if sensing my distress, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Megan. "Hey, how are you holding up? Did anything else happen last night?" I stared at the message, torn between wanting to pour out all my fears and not wanting to worry her further. Finally, I typed out a response. "I'm okay. Just tired. Got a weird text last night, but it was probably just a wrong number." I hit send before I could change my mind. Almost immediately, my phone rang. Megan's face popped up on the screen. "Hey, Meg," I answered, trying to keep my voice steady. "Don't hey Meg me," she said, her tone a mix of concern and frustration. "What weird text? What's going on, Liv?" I sank onto my couch, suddenly overwhelmed by the need to talk to someone. "I don't know, Meg. I'm freaking out. Someone texted me, 'Sweet dreams,' last night from an unknown number, and now things in my apartment are moved around, and I keep feeling like someone's watching me and I can't work and—" Whoa, slow down," Megan interrupted. "Take a deep breath, okay?" I did as she said, feeling the tightness in my chest ease slightly. "Okay, now tell me everything," she said gently. So I did. I told her about the text, about the sleepless night, about all the little things I'd noticed out of place. As I talked, I could feel the panic rising again. "Liv, this is serious," Megan said when I finished. "I really think you need to go to the police again." "And tell them what?" I asked, my voice cracking. "That my coffee maker moved? They'll think I'm nuts." "Then don't stay there," Megan insisted. "Come stay with me and Jake, at least for a few days until we can figure this out." The offer was tempting. So tempting. But something held me back. "I can't, Meg. I have this big presentation this afternoon. If I miss it, I could lose my job. And I can't let whoever's doing this drive me out of my own home." Megan sighed heavily. "I get it. I don't like it, but I get it. But promise me you'll be careful, and call me the second anything else happens, okay?" "I promise," I said, feeling a little calmer just from talking to her. After we hung up, I tried to return to work. But the walls still seemed to press in on me, my skin prickling with the sensation of unseen eyes. Every shadow felt menacing, every reflection in the window a potential face watching me. As the afternoon wore on, my nerves frayed further. I managed to finish the presentation slides, but my mind was far from focused on work. As I practiced my talking points, I kept losing my train of thought, distracted by every small sound. At 1:30, I gathered my things to head to the office. As I reached for my keys, my gaze fell on the building across the street. For a split second, I could have sworn I saw a curtain move, as if someone had quickly stepped back from the window. My heart raced as I stared at the now still window. Had I imagined it? Was my paranoia getting the best of me? Shaking my head, I forced myself to leave the apartment. The presentation. Focus on the presentation. The office was a welcome change from the oppressive atmosphere of my apartment. The familiar buzz of activity, the presence of other people, helped calm my nerves slightly. I made it through the presentation on autopilot, my professional mask hiding the turmoil beneath. As soon as it was over, Linda approached me with a concerned look. "Olivia, are you feeling all right?" You seemed a bit distracted during the presentation. I forced a smile. Just a bit under the weather, I lied. Nothing serious. Linda nodded, though she didn't look entirely convinced. Well, take care of yourself. We need you at your best. The implied warning was clear. I couldn't let this situation affect my work any longer. As night fell, I found myself dreading the return to my apartment. The office had felt safe, surrounded by people, but now as I stood outside my building, keys in hand, fear gripped me once again. Taking a deep breath, I stepped inside. Everything looked normal. No signs of intrusion, no items out of place. Maybe I had been imagining things this morning. Maybe the stress was getting to me. I was about to relax when I heard it, a faint clicking sound from within the walls. I froze, ears straining. There it was again. Click, click, like the sound of a camera shutter. Heart pounding, I followed the sound to my bedroom. It seemed to be coming from near the ceiling. Grabbing a chair, I climbed up to investigate. My blood ran cold as I discovered a tiny camera hidden in my smoke detector. My safe haven shattered in an instant. All my fears, all my paranoia had been justified. Someone was watching me, and they were closer than I ever imagined. I stumbled backward off the chair, my mind reeling from the discovery of the hidden camera. My safe haven, my private space had been violated. Questions raced through my mind. How long had it been there? What had it seen? Who was watching? With shaking hands, I grabbed my phone and snapped a picture of the tiny lens peeking out from the smoke detector. Evidence. I needed evidence. I spent the next few hours researching hacking and surveillance, my mind racing with possibilities. The internet was a rabbit hole of information, some helpful, some terrifying. I learned about different types of hidden cameras, ways to detect them, and methods of protecting oneself from electronic surveillance. As the night wore on, my eyes strained from staring at the screen. I came to a decision. I couldn't just sit here and be a victim. I had to take control. The next morning, I called in sick to work. Linda wasn't pleased, but I couldn't bring myself to care. This was more important than any job. I made my way to an electronics store, my heart pounding with each setup as I installed security cameras in my apartment. The irony wasn't lost on me, fighting surveillance with more surveillance, but I needed to know what was happening when I wasn't there. As I positioned the last camera, my neighbor, Mr. Johnson, an elderly man who lived across the hall, knocked on my open door. "Everything all right, Olivia?" he asked, his bushy eyebrows furrowed in concern. "I saw you carrying in all those boxes. You're not moving out, are you?" I forced a smile, trying to appear calm. "No, Mr. Johnson. Just doing some home improvements." He nodded, though he still looked worried. "Well, if you need any help, you just let me know. It's not safe for a young woman to be alone in the city these days." His words sent a chill down my spine, though I knew he meant well. "Thank you. I appreciate that," I said, closing the door perhaps a bit too quickly. With the cameras in place, connected to an app on my phone, I felt a small sense of security return. Whatever was going on, I would have proof now. The rest of the day passed in a haze of anxiety and hypervigilance. I jumped at every notification, rushing to check the footage, but finding nothing out of the ordinary. Part of me was relieved, but another part was frustrated. I needed answers. As night fell, exhaustion began to set in. The lack of sleep from the past few days was catching up with me. Despite my fear, I found myself drifting off on the couch, the gentle hum of the TV in the background. I was jolted awake by a notification from my phone. Bleary-eyed, I checked the app, my heart racing. But it was just a false alarm. A shadow from a passing car had triggered the motion sensor. Sighing, I was about to put the phone down when I heard it. A faint clicking sound from the walls. I froze, suddenly wide awake. There it was again. Click, click. Like before, but different, moving. My mind raced. Was it the hidden camera again? Or something else? Someone else? Gathering my courage, I stood up, determined to find the source of the sound. I moved slowly through my apartment, ears straining. The clicking seemed to be coming from inside the walls, moving from room to room. In the kitchen, I pressed my ear against the wall. The sound was clearer now, accompanied by a faint scratching. It was as if something, or someone, was crawling through the walls of my apartment. Panic threatened to overwhelm me, but I forced it down. I needed to think rationally. What could it be? Rats? Some kind of electrical issue? I was about to call the building superintendent when a new sound froze me in place. A muffled voice coming from within the wall. Target is active. Proceeding with surveillance. My blood ran cold. This wasn't some random creep with a camera. This was organized, professional. I was being watched, monitored, tracked. With trembling hands, I reached for my phone to call Megan, but as I did, the screen lit up with an incoming call from an unknown number. For a moment, I stared at the phone, terror paralyzing me. Then, driven by a desperate need for answers, I answered. "Hello?" I whispered. There was silence on the other end, then a distorted voice spoke. "We see you, Olivia. We've always seen you." I ended the call, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. This couldn't be happening. It had to be a nightmare. But the clicking in the walls continued, a constant reminder that this was all too real. I didn't sleep that night. How could I, knowing that eyes were watching me, that ears were listening to my every move? I paced my apartment, checking and rechecking my own cameras, jumping at every small noise. As dawn broke, I was a wreck. Exhausted, terrified, and feeling completely alone. I couldn't go to work like this, but I couldn't stay here either. With shaking hands, I packed a small bag. I needed to get out, to go somewhere safe. But where? Megan's place? A hotel? Nowhere felt safe anymore. Just as I was about to leave, my phone buzzed with a text from Megan. "Hey, haven't heard from you. Everything okay?" I stared at the message, tears welling up in my eyes. Should I tell her? Would that put her in danger too? But I needed help. I couldn't face this alone anymore. Taking a deep breath, I called her. "Liv? What's going on?" Megan answered, concern evident in her voice. "Meg," I choked out, my voice breaking. "I need help. Can I come over?" "Of course," she said without hesitation. "I'll come pick you up. Are you okay? What happened?" I glanced nervously at the walls, aware that every word might be overheard. I can't explain over the phone. I'll tell you everything when I see you. Just hurry, please." As I ended the call, I heard the clicking in the walls again, faster now, more urgent. They knew I was leaving. They were watching me pack, listening to my call. I grabbed my bag and ran for the door, no longer caring about being quiet or subtle. As I wrenched it open, I almost collided with Mr. Johnson, who was standing in the hallway with his hand raised to knock. "Olivia?" he said, startled. "I heard noises. Is everything—" But I pushed past him, mumbling a quick apology as I raced for the stairs. I couldn't risk the elevator, couldn't risk being trapped. As I burst out of the building into the morning sunlight, I gulped in the fresh air, feeling like I could breathe for the first time in days. But the relief was short-lived. As I scanned the street for Megan's car, my eyes were drawn to a figure across the street. A man in a nondescript jacket and hat, his face obscured, was watching me. As our eyes met, he slowly raised a hand to his ear, as if speaking into a hidden microphone. My heart raced as I spotted Megan's car turning the corner. I sprinted towards it, throwing myself into the passenger seat. "Drive," I gasped. "Please, just drive." Megan's eyes widened at my disheveled appearance and panicked tone, but she didn't question me. She hit the gas and we sped away from my apartment building. As we drove, I glanced in the side mirror. The man in the hat was gone. but a black SUV had pulled out behind us. "Meg," I said, my voice shaking. "I think we're being followed." Megan's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "Okay," she said, her voice surprisingly calm. "Let's find out for sure. Hold on." She made a series of quick turns, weaving through traffic. I kept my eyes on the mirror, watching as the black SUV matched our every move. "It's still there," I whispered. Megan nodded grimly. "All right, new plan. We're not going to my place. I know somewhere we can go, somewhere safe. Just trust me, okay?" As we sped through the city, leaving my apartment and the watchers behind, I realized that my life had irrevocably changed. The photo I never took had set in motion a series of events I couldn't have imagined. And now, I was running from an unseen enemy, with no idea what they wanted or how this would end. But I wasn't alone anymore. And for now, that had to be enough. Megan's car weaved through the city streets, the black SUV still tailing us at a distance. My heart raced as I watched it in the side mirror, my mind reeling from the events of the past few days. "Where are we going?" I asked, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. Megan's eyes remained fixed on the road, her jaw set with determination. "My uncle's cabin. It's about an hour outside the city. Off the grid, no internet, no cell service. If anyone's tracking your phone or something, we'll lose them there." I nodded, grateful for her quick thinking. As we hit the highway, the black SUV fell back, eventually disappearing from view. But the relief was short-lived as fury began to replace my fear. "I can't believe this is happening," I muttered, clenching my fists. "Who are these people? What do they want from me?" Megan glanced at me, concern etched on her face. "Liv, you need to tell me everything, from the beginning." So I did. I poured out the whole story, the mysterious photo, the hidden cameras, the voices in the walls. By the time I finished, we were deep in the countryside, surrounded by dense forest. "Jesus, Liv," Megan breathed as she turned onto a narrow dirt road. "Why didn't you tell me sooner? We could have..." "Could have what?" I interrupted, my voice sharp with frustration. "Called the cops? They didn't believe me before. And now I sound completely insane." Megan fell silent as we pulled up to a rustic cabin nestled among the trees. As soon as we stepped out of the car, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The air was clean, the only sounds were birds and rustling leaves. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. Inside, the cabin was cozy but sparse. A small living area, a kitchenette, and 2 bedrooms. Megan busied herself checking the windows and doors while I sank onto the worn couch, exhaustion finally catching up with me. "Okay," Megan said, sitting beside me. "We're safe here for now, but we need a plan. We can't hide forever." I nodded, running a hand through my tangled hair. "I know, but what can we do? We don't even know who these people are or what they want." Megan's eyes lit up with an idea. "Your neighbor, the one with the film equipment. You said he works at a local studio, right? Maybe we can start there. Do some digging." The thought of confronting my neighbor sent a chill down my spine. But Megan was right. We needed answers. "All right," I said, steeling myself. "But how do we do that without tipping them off?" Megan grinned, a mischievous glint in her eye. "Leave that to me. I've got an idea." The next morning, we headed back to the city. Megan's plan was simple but risky. She would pose as a potential client at the film studio while I snuck into my neighbor's apartment to look for evidence. As we approached my building, my heart began to race. "Meg, are you sure about this? What if he's home?" "That's why I'm going to the studio," she reassured me. "I'll keep him busy. You just focus on getting in and out quickly." With a deep breath, I nodded and got out of the car. Watching Megan drive away, I felt terrifyingly alone. But the anger that had been building inside me propelled me forward. I was done being a victim. Using the spare key I'd borrowed from the superintendent's office during a fire drill months ago, I slipped into my neighbor's apartment. The place was meticulously clean, almost sterile. But what caught my eye was the wall of computer monitors, each displaying a different feed. My blood ran cold as I recognized my own apartment on one of the screens. Another showed the hallway, a third the street outside. This was far more extensive than I'd imagined. Forcing down my revulsion, I began searching for anything that might explain why I was being watched. I rifled through drawers, checked under the mattress, even pried at floorboards. Nothing. Just as I was about to give up, I noticed a slight discoloration on one wall. Pressing against it, I felt it give way, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a single flash drive. My hands shook as I plugged it into one of the computers. What I saw made my blood run cold. Files upon files of surveillance data, not just on me, but on dozens of people. Each file was labeled with a code name and a series of dates. But it was the last folder that truly terrified me. Labeled Protocol Omega, it contained detailed plans for something called the Harvest. As I scanned the documents, phrases jumped out at me. Soul capture, energy transference, dimensional gateway. This was insane. It had to be some kind of joke or maybe the plot of a film my neighbor was working on. But deep down I knew it was real. The surveillance, the voices in the walls, the constant feeling of being watched. It all fit into this terrifying puzzle. I was so engrossed in the files that I almost didn't hear the apartment door open. Panic surged through me as I quickly unplugged the flash drive and shoved it in my pocket. "Well, well," a familiar voice said from behind me. "I was wondering when you'd finally work up the courage to investigate." I spun around to find my neighbor standing in the doorway, a small smile playing on his lips. There was no surprise in his eyes, only a cold amusement. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice steadier than I felt. "What is all this?" He chuckled, stepping into the room. "Oh, Olivia, always so curious. That's why you were chosen, you know. Your inquisitive nature, your resilience, you're perfect for the protocol." "Protocol Omega?" I spat out the words. "The Harvest? What the hell are you talking about?" His smile widened, sending chills down my spine. "You've seen the files. You tell me." My mind raced, trying to make sense of the insanity I'd read. "You're harvesting people? Their souls? For what?" "For ascension," he said, his eyes gleaming with fervor. "For the next step in human evolution. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You're not ready for the full truth yet." He took a step towards me and I instinctively backed away. "Stay back," I warned, looking for an escape route. "Oh, Olivia," he sighed, shaking his head. "You can't run from this. You're part of something greater now. Something magnificent." Just then, a commotion in the hallway broke the tension. Megan's voice rang out, accompanied by the heavy footsteps of the building's security guard. "I'm telling you, I heard a scream from this apartment," Megan was saying, her voice pitched with false concern. My neighbor's face twisted in annoyance. He glanced between me and the door, clearly weighing his options. I seized the moment of distraction to make a break for it. I shoved past him, ignoring his grasp at my arm, and burst into the hallway. "Liv!" Megan exclaimed, feigning surprise. "What are you—" "No time," I gasped, grabbing her hand. "We need to go. Now!" We raced down the stairs, ignoring the shouts behind us. As we burst out of the building and into Megan's waiting car, I finally allowed myself to breathe. "Did you get anything?" Megan asked as she peeled away from the curb. I nodded, feeling the weight of the flash drive in my pocket. "More than I bargained for," I said grimly. "Meg, this is bigger and crazier than we could have imagined." As we sped away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. My neighbor stood on the steps of the building, watching us go. Even from a distance, I could see the cold smile on his face. This, I realized with a chill, was far from over. "Where to now?" Megan asked, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. I took a deep breath, my mind racing with the implications of what I'd discovered. "We need help," I said finally. "Professional help. It's time to go to the police." As we drove towards the police station, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were diving headfirst into something far beyond our understanding. The photo I never took had opened a door to a world I never knew existed, and now there was no going back. Whatever this Protocol Omega was, whatever the harvest entailed, I was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The fluorescent lights of the police station buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow on the worn linoleum floor. Megan and I sat side by side on uncomfortable plastic chairs, waiting to speak with a detective. The flash drive felt like it was burning a hole in my pocket, its contents weighing heavily on my mind. "Are you sure about this, Liv?" Megan whispered, her eyes darting around the bustling station. "What if they don't believe us?" I swallowed hard, trying to quell the doubt rising in my chest. "They have to. We have evidence now." Just then, a tall, broad-shouldered detective approached us. His weathered face bore the signs of too many long nights and not enough sleep. "Ms. Walker?" he asked, his voice gruff, but not unkind. "I'm Detective Ramirez. Follow me, please." Megan squeezed my hand reassuringly as I stood to follow the detective. We made our way to a small, windowless room that smelled faintly of stale coffee and desperation. "So," Detective Ramirez began, settling into a chair across from me. "You say you have evidence of what exactly?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "Surveillance, illegal surveillance, a conspiracy, and something worse." I pulled out the flash drive, placing it on the table between us. "It's all here." Detective Ramirez raised an eyebrow, picking up the drive. "Mind if I take a look?" I nodded, watching anxiously as he plugged it into his laptop. His eyes widened slightly as he scrolled through the files, his brow furrowing deeper with each passing moment. "Ms. Walker," he said slowly, looking up at me. "Where did you get this?" I launched into my story, starting with the mysterious photo and ending with our confrontation in my neighbor's apartment. As I spoke, I could see the detective's expression shifting from skepticism to concern. "This is quite a story," he said when I finished. "And you're sure about all of this? The hidden cameras, the voices in the walls?" "I know how it sounds," I said, leaning forward, "but it's all true. You've seen the files. There's something big going on, something dangerous." Detective Ramirez nodded slowly, his eyes returning to the screen. "These files are disturbing, to say the least. But Ms. Walker, you have to understand, allegations like this require solid proof. What you're suggesting, a widespread conspiracy, soul harvesting, it's beyond the scope of a typical investigation." My heart sank. "So you don't believe me?" "I didn't say that," he replied, holding up a hand. "I believe that you believe this is happening, and these surveillance files are certainly cause for concern. But the rest of it, we need more to go on." Frustration bubbled up inside me. "What more do you need? People are in danger. I'm in danger." Detective Ramirez's expression softened slightly. "I understand your frustration. Look, here's what I can do. I'll open an investigation into the surveillance. We'll look into your neighbor, the film studio, see what we can find. But the rest of this, the Protocol Omega, the harvest, I can't officially pursue that without more concrete evidence." I slumped back in my chair, feeling defeated. So what am I supposed to do? Just wait around while they come for me? "No," he said firmly. "You stay vigilant. Document everything. If you see or hear anything suspicious, you call me immediately." He slid a card across the table. "Day or night. And Ms. Walker? Be careful. If even half of what you're saying is true, you're dealing with some very dangerous people." I nodded, taking the card. As I left the station, Megan was waiting anxiously. "Well?" she asked as soon as she saw me. "What did they say?" I filled her in as we walked to her car, the weight of the detective's words settling over me like a heavy blanket. "So that's it?" Megan said, disbelief coloring her voice. "They're just going to investigate the surveillance and ignore the rest?" I shrugged, feeling drained. What else can they do? We sound crazy, Meg. Hell, I'm starting to think I am crazy. Megan grabbed my shoulders, forcing me to look at her. You're not crazy, Liv. I've seen the evidence. I believe you. And if the police won't help, we'll figure this out ourselves. Her determination sparked something in me, reigniting the anger and resolve that had been smothered by doubt. You're right, I said, straightening up. We can't just sit around and wait. We need to take action. That's my girl, Megan grinned. So, what's the plan? I thought for a moment, my mind racing. We need more information. The files mentioned other targets, other people being watched. If we can find them, maybe we can build a stronger case. Megan nodded, her eyes gleaming with excitement. Detective work, I like it. Where do we start? The film studio, I said decisively. My neighbor works there, and I bet it's not a coincidence. There has to be a connection. As we drove towards the studio, a plan began to form in my mind. We'd pose as aspiring filmmakers, try to get a tour of the facility. Maybe we could find something, anything, to corroborate our story. The studio was a sprawling complex on the outskirts of the city, all sleek glass and polished metal. As we approached the reception desk, I felt my palms start to sweat. Can I help you? The receptionist asked, her smile just a little too perfect. Yes, I said, forcing confidence into my voice. We're film students from the university. We were hoping to get a tour of the facility for our final project. The receptionist's smile never wavered, but I saw something flicker in her eyes. I'm sorry, but we don't offer tours to the public. Studio policy. Oh, but surely you could make an exception, Megan chimed in, laying on the charm. It would mean so much to us. We're huge fans of the work done here. For a moment, I thought it might work, but then I saw the receptionist's gaze shift to something behind us. Is there a problem here? A familiar voice asked. I turned slowly, my heart sinking as I came face to face with my neighbor. He looked different here, more polished, more in control. His eyes met mine, and I saw recognition flash across his face, followed quickly by something darker. No problem at all, he said smoothly, his gaze never leaving mine. I'd be happy to give these young filmmakers a tour myself. Follow me, please. Megan shot me a worried glance, but we had no choice. We followed him down a long hallway, the sound of our footsteps echoing ominously. I must say, I'm impressed by your persistence, Olivia, he said as we walked. But you're in over your head. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Then why don't you enlighten us? I shot back, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. He chuckled, the sound sending chills down my spine. All in due time. For now, let me show you what you came to see. He led us into a large, dimly lit room filled with monitors. Each screen showed a different location, different people going about their daily lives. It was like my neighbor's apartment, but on a massive scale. Welcome, he said, spreading his arms wide, to the heart of our operation. Megan gasped beside me, her hand finding mine and squeezing tight. I stared at the screens, my mind reeling. This was it, the proof we needed. But as I turned to confront my neighbor, I realized with a sinking feeling that we might have just walked into a trap. His smile was cold as he pressed a button on a nearby console. The door behind us slid shut with a definitive click. Now then, he said, his voice echoing in the cavernous room. Let's have a real conversation about Protocol Omega, shall we? As the monitors flickered around us, casting eerie shadows on the walls, I realized that our amateur detective work had led us straight into the lion's den. Whatever came next, there was no turning back now. The truth about the photo I never took, and the sinister plot it had uncovered, was finally within reach. But at what cost? The room hummed with the soft whir of countless hard drives and cooling fans. The wall of monitors cast a ghostly blue glow over everything, illuminating my neighbor's face in a way that made him look almost inhuman. Megan's hand was clammy in mine, her breath coming in short, sharp bursts. What is all this? I demanded, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. Who are you people? My neighbor, if I could even call him that anymore, smiled. It was a cold, calculated expression that never reached his eyes. My name is Daniel Thorne. I'm the director of special projects here at Nexus Films. But that's just a cover, of course. A cover for what? Megan asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Thorne's gaze swept over the monitors. For the most important scientific endeavor in human history, we're on the brink of a breakthrough that will change everything we know about reality, consciousness, and the very nature of the soul. I forced myself to act normal, smiling at my captors while my insides churned with suspicion. That sounds ambitious, but what does it have to do with spying on people? Thorne chuckled, the sound devoid of any real mirth. Spying? Oh, Olivia, this is so much more than simple surveillance. Each of these subjects has been carefully chosen. They possess certain qualities that make them ideal for our work. My eyes widened in shock as I spotted a familiar face on one of the monitors. That's Dr. Emily Chen. She's a renowned quantum physicist. I've read her work. Very good. Thorne nodded approvingly. Dr. Chen is indeed one of our subjects. Her groundbreaking theories on quantum entanglement have been instrumental in our research. I scanned the other monitors, recognition dawning. Wait, I know some of these people. That's Marcus Webb, the meditation guru. And there's Sophia Patel, the prodigy violinist. What do they all have in common? Thorne's eyes gleamed with an almost fanatical light. They're all exceptional, Olivia, each in their own way. Athletes at the peak of physical perfection, artists capable of stirring the deepest emotions, scientists pushing the boundaries of human knowledge. And then there's you. A chill ran down my spine. Me, I'm nothing special. On the contrary, Thorne said, taking a step closer, you possess a rare combination of intuition and analytical thinking. Your ability to sense the hidden camera, to piece together the clues, it's remarkable. You're exactly the kind of mind we need for the next phase of our project. Megan's grip on my hand tightened. And what exactly is this project? What's Protocol Omega? Thorne's smile widened. Yes. Protocol Omega. The culmination of decades of research into the nature of consciousness. We've discovered that the human soul, yes, the soul, Olivia, don't look so skeptical, is quantifiable energy. Energy that can be measured, manipulated, and ultimately transferred. The implications of his words hit me like a physical blow. Transferred? You mean... Imagine, Thorne continued, his voice taking on a reverent tone, a world where death is no longer the end, where the accumulated knowledge and experience of our greatest minds can be preserved indefinitely, where consciousness itself can transcend the limitations of our fragile bodies. I shook my head, struggling to process what I was hearing. But the surveillance, the hidden cameras, why? The soul manifests most clearly in moments of intense emotion or concentration, Thorne explained. By observing our subjects in their most private moments, we can map the energy fluctuations of their souls. And once we have that map, you can copy it, I finished, feeling sick to my stomach. Or steal it. Thorne's eyes flashed. A crude way of putting it, but essentially correct. The harvest, as we call it, is the process of extracting and storing these soul energies. But it's not theft, Olivia. It's evolution. The next step in human development. Megan, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke up. You're insane. All of you. You can't just take people's souls. Thorne turned his cold gaze on her. My dear, we already have. Did you really think your visit here today was a coincidence? You've both been part of the experiment for longer than you know. My mind raced, thinking back to the strange occurrences of the past weeks. The feeling of being watched, the unexplained noises, the mysterious photo. The picture on my phone, I said slowly. The one of me sleeping. That was you, testing the technology? Thorne nodded, looking pleased. Very good, Olivia. That photo was our first successful attempt at capturing a soul image, a snapshot of your consciousness at its most vulnerable. It was a breakthrough moment for us. But why reveal all this to us now? I asked, trying to buy time as I frantically searched for a way out of this situation. Because, my dear Olivia, you're ready for the next stage, Thorne said, pressing a button on a nearby console. A hidden door slid open, revealing a room filled with strange, high-tech equipment. At the center was what looked like a modified MRI machine, surrounded by banks of computers. Behold, Thorne said, his voice filled with pride, the culmination of our work, the Nexus Chamber, capable of extracting, storing, and even transferring soul energy from one vessel to another. I stared at the machine, a mix of fascination and horror washing over me. You want us to be your test subjects, I realized aloud. Thorne's smile was almost gentle. Not test subjects, Olivia. Pioneers. You and your friend here have the honor of being among the first to experience true transcendence. Your consciousnesses will be freed from the limitations of your physical forms, ready to be uploaded into the neural network we're developing. Imagine it. Immortality, omniscience, godhood. Megan's voice shook as she spoke. And if we refuse? Thorne's expression hardened. I'm afraid that's not an option. You know too much now. But don't worry. Once the process is complete, you'll understand. You'll thank us. As he spoke, 2 burly security guards entered the room, moving to flank us. I felt Megan tense beside me, ready to fight or flee. But I knew we were outmatched. We needed a different approach. Taking a deep breath, I forced myself to relax, to appear contemplative. This is a lot to take in, Mr. Thorne. You have to understand our hesitation. Can you at least show us more? Help us understand what we're getting into? Thorne studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. Of course. I appreciate your open-mindedness, Olivia. I knew you'd see the potential. Come, let me give you a proper tour of our facility. By the end, I think you'll be eager to take your place in the chamber. As Thorne led us deeper into the complex, I caught Megan's eye. A silent understanding passed between us. We'd play along for now, gathering as much information as we could. But we both knew we couldn't let this madness continue. Somehow, someway, we had to stop Protocol Omega and expose the truth behind Nexus Films. The photo I never took had led us down a rabbit hole deeper and darker than I could have ever imagined. As we followed Thorne, surrounded by images of unknowing souls being monitored and measured, I realized that our very understanding of reality was about to be challenged, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Not just for us, but for the very essence of what it means to be human. The corridors of Nexus Films seemed to stretch endlessly, each turn revealing new wonders and horrors. Thorne led us through labs filled with equipment I couldn't begin to comprehend, past rooms where scientists pored over data streams that looked more like abstract art than anything recognizable. This is our primary research wing, Thorne explained, his voice filled with pride. Here, we analyze the data collected from our subjects, mapping the energetic patterns of their souls. I forced myself to nod, to appear interested rather than horrified. It's impressive, but how does it work exactly? How do you measure something as intangible as a soul? Thorne's eyes lit up at the question. Ah, Olivia, always the inquisitive one. It's quite fascinating, really. You see, we've discovered that consciousness emits a unique quantum signature. It's subtle, nearly undetectable by conventional means. But with our technology, we can not only detect it, but map it in incredible detail. He led us into a room dominated by a massive holographic display. With a wave of his hand, the air filled with swirling patterns of light, like a galaxy made of data points. This, he said, gesturing to the display, is you, Olivia. I stared at the image, mesmerized despite myself. The swirling lights pulsed and shifted, forming complex patterns that seemed to dance on the edge of recognizability. Each point of light represents a thought, a memory, an emotion. Thorne continued. Together they form the unique tapestry of your consciousness, your soul, if you will. Megan, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, spoke up. And you can What? Copy this? Thorn smiled. Copy, transfer, even merge multiple consciousnesses. Imagine it. The combined knowledge and experience of humanity's greatest minds, all accessible in an instant. The implications were staggering. I found myself both horrified and, to my shame, intrigued. But what happens to the original person when you harvest their soul? Thorn's expression grew serious. A necessary sacrifice for the greater good. The physical body is left in a vegetative state, but the essence of the person, their true self, lives on in our network. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just unethical, it was monstrous. You're killing people, I said, unable to keep the disgust from my voice. No, Olivia, Thorn said, his tone patient as if explaining to a child. We're freeing them, elevating them. In time, you'll understand. As we continued the tour, my mind raced. We needed to find a way out, to alert the authorities. But every room we passed was filled with armed guards and watchful eyes. Escape seemed impossible. Thorn led us to another lab, this one filled with what looked like cryogenic chambers. This is where we store the harvested consciousnesses, he explained. Each pod contains the digitized soul of one of our subjects. I peered into the nearest pod, my heart skipping a beat as I recognized the face inside. Dr. Chen, I whispered. The renowned physicist lay motionless, her eyes closed as if in deep sleep. But the monitors surrounding her pod pulsed with activity, displaying the same swirling patterns we'd seen earlier. Yes, Dr. Chen was one of our first successful harvests, Thorn said, a note of pride in his voice. Her consciousness now exists within our network, free to explore the furthest reaches of quantum theory unencumbered by physical limitations. And she agreed to this? Megan asked, her voice thick with disbelief. Thorn's smile faltered slightly. Not exactly, but she'll thank us when she fully awakens in the network. They all will. I felt sick to my stomach. This was beyond unethical. It was a violation of the most fundamental human rights. We had to stop this somehow. As if reading my thoughts, Thorn's expression hardened. I can see you're still struggling with the concept, Olivia. Perhaps a more personal demonstration is in order. He led us to a smaller room, dominated by what looked like two high-tech recliners. This is one of our transfer stations, he explained. Here we can temporarily link two consciousnesses, allowing for direct mind-to-mind communication. My pulse quickened. This could be our chance. If we could get to one of those chairs, maybe we could send out a distress call, alert someone to what was happening here. How does it work? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Thorn gestured for us to sit. It's quite simple. You'll each put on one of these neural interfaces. The machine will create a temporary link between your minds, allowing you to share thoughts, memories, even sensations. Megan shot me a worried glance, but I gave her a subtle nod. We had to play along for now. As we settled into the chairs, Thorn began attaching electrodes to our temples. Now, this might feel a bit strange at first, he warned, but try to relax. Open your minds to each other. The machine hummed to life, and suddenly, I felt a presence in my mind that wasn't my own. Megan's thoughts, her fears, her determination, all of it washed over me in a dizzying rush. Liv? I heard her voice, but not with my ears. It was inside my head. Can you hear me? Yes, I thought back. Meg, we need to find a way out of here. This is insane. I know, came her reply. But how? We're surrounded. As we communicated silently, I became aware of another presence. Thorn was watching us, a satisfied smile on his face. Remarkable, isn't it? He said aloud. This is just a taste of what awaits in the network. Imagine this connection, but with thousands, millions of minds. The collective knowledge of humanity at your fingertips. I tried to focus, to push past the overwhelming sensations and think of a plan. That's when I felt it. A flicker of something else in the connection. Another mind, faint but distinct. Hello? I projected the thought cautiously. Is someone else there? A voice, weak but clear, responded. Help us. Please. You have to stop them. I gasped aloud, causing Thorn to look at me sharply. What is it? What do you see? Thinking quickly, I forced a smile. It's incredible. I can feel Megan's thoughts, her memories. You're right. It's like nothing I've ever experienced. Thorn nodded, looking pleased. And this is just the beginning. In the full network, you'll have access to the combined knowledge of all our harvested minds. Imagine the possibilities. As he spoke, I concentrated on the faint presence I'd felt. Who are you? I thought. How can we help? The response came in fragments, as if the connection was unstable. Trapped. Network. Not willing. Find the core. Shut it down. My heart raced. This was it. Proof that Thorn's victims were still conscious, still fighting. We had to find a way to free them. Aloud, I said, Mr. Thorn, this is truly amazing. I think I'm starting to understand what you're trying to achieve here. His eyes lit up. I knew you would, Olivia. You have a brilliant mind. You'll be a valuable addition to the network. I forced myself to nod, to appear eager. Can you show us more? I'd love to see how the full network operates. Thorn hesitated for a moment, then smiled. Of course. I think you're ready for the next stage. Follow me. As we disconnected from the machine and stood to follow Thorn, I caught Megan's eye. A silent understanding passed between us. We had a mission now. Find the core of this twisted network and shut it down. The photo I never took had led us into this nightmare, but now we had a chance to end it. As we walked deeper into the heart of Nexus Films, I steeled myself for what was to come. The fate of countless stolen souls hung in the balance. Whatever happened next, we couldn't fail. The true test of our resolve was about to begin. Thorn led us through a series of increasingly secure checkpoints, each requiring higher levels of clearance. The deeper we went, the more my heart raced. We were getting close to something big. I could feel it. This is our most restricted area, Thorn explained as we approached a massive vault door. What you're about to see is the culmination of decades of research and billions in funding. As the door slowly swung open, I exchanged a quick glance with Megan. Her eyes were wide, a mix of fear and determination evident in her expression. We both knew this might be our only chance to find a way to stop this madness. The room beyond the vault door was enormous, easily the size of a football field. But what caught my attention immediately was the structure at its center, a towering pillar of pulsing light and swirling data streams. Behold, Thorn said, his voice filled with reverence. The core, the digital afterlife, the future of human consciousness. I stared at the core, mesmerized despite myself. It was beautiful in a terrifying way, like watching a supernova consume a solar system. How does it work? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Thorn smiled, clearly pleased by my apparent interest. The core is a quantum supercomputer unlike anything the world has ever seen. It houses the collective consciousness of all our harvested subjects. Here, minds can interact, share knowledge, and evolve beyond the limitations of physical form. As we approached the base of the core, I noticed rows upon rows of pods surrounding it, each connected to the central pillar by glowing cables. Are these? Megan started to ask, her voice trailing off. Yes, Thorn nodded. These are our active subjects. Their bodies are kept in a state of suspended animation while their minds exist within the core. I peered into the nearest pod, my breath catching as I recognized the face inside. It was Marcus Webb, the meditation guru I'd seen on the monitors earlier. His eyes were closed, his expression peaceful, but the monitors attached to his pod showed intense brain activity. Can they communicate with us? I asked, thinking back to the faint presence I'd felt during our earlier MindLink session. Thorn's expression grew thoughtful. In theory, yes. The core allows for direct mind-to-mind communication. But in practice, most subjects find the experience of digital existence so overwhelming at first that coherent communication with the physical world is difficult. I nodded, trying to appear fascinated rather than horrified. And what happens to them in there? What's it like? Imagine a world limited only by your imagination, Thorn said, his eyes gleaming with fervor. A place where you can explore the furthest reaches of scientific theory, experience any time or place in history, create entire universes with a thought. It's paradise, Olivia, and soon you'll experience it for yourself. The implications of his words sent a chill down my spine. We were running out of time. Mr. Thorn, I said, forcing a smile, this is truly incredible. I think I'm starting to understand why you've gone to such lengths to keep this secret. But I have to ask, what's the ultimate goal here? Surely you're not planning to harvest the entire world's population. Thorn chuckled. No, at least not immediately. Our current focus is on exceptional individuals, those whose minds can contribute the most to our collective knowledge. Scientists, artists, visionaries. People like you, Olivia. And what about the rest of humanity? Megan asked, her voice tight with barely contained anger. In time, everyone will have the opportunity to join the Corps, Thorn replied. But for now, we must be selective. The transition process is intensive. Not everyone survives it. My blood ran cold. What do you mean, survives it? Thorn's expression grew serious. The process of separating consciousness from the physical body is traumatic. Some minds can't handle the shock. They fragment, dissolve into the digital ether. It's regrettable, but it's a necessary risk for the advancement of our species. I struggled to keep my composure, my mind racing for a way out of this nightmare. That's when I noticed something strange about one of the pods near us. Its occupant seemed to be moving. Mr. Thorn, I said, pointing to the pod. Is that supposed to happen? Thorn frowned, moving closer to investigate. As he leaned in to examine the pod's readouts, I locked eyes with Megan. This was our chance. In a burst of synchronized movement, we sprang into action. Megan grabbed Thorn from behind, pinning his arms, while I snatched the security badge from his belt. What are you doing? Thorn shouted, struggling against Megan's grip. You don't understand what you're risking. We understand perfectly, I said, my voice cold. You're stealing people's lives, their very souls. It has to stop. Using Thorn's badge, I accessed the nearest computer terminal. Years of working with complex software paid off as I quickly navigated through the system, searching for a way to shut down the Corps. Olivia, please, Thorn pleaded, his earlier confidence crumbling. You have no idea of the consequences. If you shut down the Corps without proper procedures, you could destroy millions of minds. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the command to initiate emergency shutdown. What if he was telling the truth? Could I risk destroying all those consciousnesses? That's when I heard it, a chorus of voices, faint but growing stronger, echoing in my mind. Do it. Free us. End this torment. I realized with a start that it was coming from the Corps. The harvested minds were reaching out, begging for release. They want this, Thorn, I said, my resolve strengthening. They're asking to be freed. Thorn's eyes widened in disbelief. No, that's impossible. They're happy in there. They have to be. But I could hear the doubt in his voice. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes, the fear of a man confronting the possibility that he might be terribly, catastrophically wrong. Liv, Megan called out, still struggling to restrain Thorn. Whatever you're going to do, do it fast. We've got company. I looked up to see security guards pouring into the room, weapons drawn. Time was up. With a silent prayer, I hit the command to initiate emergency shutdown. The effect was immediate and spectacular. The core's pulsing light began to flicker and fade. The data stream swirling around it grew chaotic, then started to dissipate like mist in the morning sun. No! Thorn screamed, breaking free from Megan's grasp. He lunged for the terminal, but it was too late. Alarms blared throughout the facility as the core's light dimmed to a faint glow. The pods surrounding it hissed open one by one, their occupants stirring as if waking from a long sleep. In the chaos that followed, Megan and I managed to slip away, helping as many of the awakening victims as we could. The security guards were too overwhelmed by the mass of confused, disoriented people to stop us. As we emerged from the facility into the blinding sunlight, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The nightmare wasn't over. There would be questions to answer, authorities to deal with, lives to rebuild. But we had done it. We had shut down the core and freed its captive minds. Megan squeezed my hand as we watched police cars and ambulances converge on the Nexus Films building. "We did it, Liv," she said, her voice filled with exhausted relief. "It's over." I nodded, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The photo I never took had led us down a rabbit hole deeper and darker than I could have ever imagined. And now, as the world was about to learn the truth about Nexus Films and Protocol Omega, I knew our lives would never be the same. As the first reporters began to arrive on the scene, their cameras flashing, I took a deep breath. It was time to tell our story. Time to ensure that nothing like this could ever happen again. The truth about the digital souls in the core had to be shared, no matter the cost. The chapter of the photo I never took was ending, but a new one was just beginning. And this time, I was determined to be the author of my own story. The world outside Nexus Films was a chaos of flashing lights, sirens, and shouting voices. Police officers cordoned off the area while paramedics rushed to attend to the disoriented victims emerging from the facility. Reporters swarmed like hungry vultures, their cameras flashing incessantly. Megan and I stood at the edge of it all, still trying to process what we'd just been through. My hands were shaking, adrenaline still coursing through my veins. "Liv," Megan said, her voice barely above a whisper, "what do we do now?" Before I could answer, a gruff voice cut through the noise. "Ms. Walker? Ms. Thompson?" We turned to see Detective Ramirez pushing his way through the crowd, his face a mask of disbelief and concern. "Detective," I said, relief washing over me at the sight of a familiar face. "Thank God you're here, we need to—" He cut me off, his voice low and urgent. "Not here. Come with me now. Both of you." Without waiting for a response, he ushered us to an unmarked car parked at the edge of the chaos. As we slid into the back seat, I caught a glimpse of Thorne being led out of the building in handcuffs, his face ashen. Once we were safely in the car and moving away from the scene, Detective Ramirez spoke again. "I need you to tell me exactly what happened in there. And I mean everything." So we did. We told him about the core, the harvested consciousnesses, Thorne's grand plan for digital immortality. With each revelation, the detective's expression grew grimmer. When we finished, he was silent for a long moment. Finally, he said, "Do you have any idea what you've uncovered? This goes way beyond a simple case of illegal surveillance. There are going to be serious repercussions." "We had to stop it," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "They were stealing people's souls, Detective, trapping them in some kind of digital purgatory." He nodded slowly. "I believe you, but this isn't going to be simple to explain to the higher-ups. There are powerful people involved in this, people who won't want this story getting out." A chill ran down my spine. "What are you saying?" The detective's eyes met mine in the rearview mirror. "I'm saying you two might be in danger. We need to get you somewhere safe until we can figure out how to proceed." As the implications of his words sank in, I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me. We'd escaped one nightmare only to find ourselves in another. "Where are you taking us?" Megan asked, her voice tight with worry. "I have a cabin," Detective Ramirez replied. "Off the grid, about an hour outside the city. You'll be safe there while we sort this out." As we drove away from the city, leaving behind the chaos at Nexus Films, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Every car that passed us on the highway seemed suspicious, every glance from other drivers potentially sinister. "Try to get some rest," the detective advised as we turned onto a winding mountain road. "We've got a long night ahead of us." But sleep was impossible. My mind was racing. replaying the events of the past few days on an endless loop. The mysterious photo, the hidden cameras, the core. It all seemed like a bad dream, but the aches in my body and the lingering fear in my gut were all too real. As we pulled up to a rustic cabin nestled among towering pines, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe here, away from the city and its digital eyes, we could finally catch our breath. Detective Ramirez ushered us inside, quickly securing the perimeter. "All right," he said, once we were settled in the cabin's small living room. "Let's go over everything again, from the beginning. We need to build a solid case if we're going to expose this to the world." For the next few hours, we recounted every detail we could remember. The detective took copious notes, occasionally asking for clarification or more information. As dawn broke, casting a pale light through the cabin's windows, we finally finished our account. Detective Ramirez leaned back in his chair, rubbing his tired eyes. "This is bigger than anything I've ever dealt with," he admitted. "We're talking about a conspiracy that reaches into the highest levels of government and industry. Exposing it won't be easy, and it certainly won't be safe. But we have to try," I insisted. "We can't let them get away with this. All those people, trapped in that digital hellscape." The detective nodded grimly. "I agree. But we need to be smart about this. We can't just go to the press or the feds. We need irrefutable evidence, and we need protection." Megan, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke up. "I think I might know someone who can help. An old friend from college. Well, let's just say he's got experience with exposing government secrets." Detective Ramirez raised an eyebrow. "A whistleblower?" Megan nodded. "Something like that. He's been off the grid for years, but I think I can get in touch with him. If anyone can help us get this information out safely, it's him." I felt a spark of hope ignite in my chest. "Do it," I said. "Whatever it takes, we need to make sure the world knows the truth about Nexus Films and the core." As Megan stepped outside to make a secure call, I turned to Detective Ramirez. "What about the victims, the people we rescued from the core? Are they safe?" He sighed heavily. "They're in protective custody for now, but their conditions are varied. Some seem to have come through relatively unscathed, while others—" He trailed off, his expression pained. "Others what?" I pressed. "Some of them are struggling to readjust to physical reality," he explained. "Years of existing as pure consciousness in a digital realm have left them changed. We're doing everything we can to help them, but it's uncharted territory." The weight of what we'd uncovered settled over me like a heavy blanket. We'd saved those people from digital imprisonment, but at what cost? And how many others were still out there, trapped in similar facilities? Megan returned, her face flushed with excitement. "I got through to him. He's willing to help, but we need to move fast. He's arranging secure transport for us, but we have to leave in an hour." Detective Ramirez nodded, already moving to gather our few belongings. "I'll get you to the rendezvous point. After that, you're on your own. Are you sure about this?" I exchanged a look with Megan, seeing my own determination reflected in her eyes. "We're sure," I said. "We started this, and we're going to see it through." As we prepared to leave the relative safety of the cabin, I couldn't help but think back to the photo that had started it all. That single, impossible image had led us down a rabbit hole deeper and darker than I could have ever imagined, but it had also shown us a truth that needed to be exposed no matter the cost. The sun was rising over the mountains as we left the cabin, casting long shadows across the forest floor. Whatever lay ahead, danger, uncertainty, the monumental task of exposing a conspiracy that reached to the highest levels of power, we were ready to face it. The photo I never took had changed everything. Now it was up to us to make sure that change was for the better. As we drove towards an uncertain future, I made a silent vow. The truth would be told, the victims would find justice, and the world would never be the same again. The rendezvous point turned out to be an abandoned gas station just off the highway, its faded signs and rusted pumps a ghostly reminder of busier times. As Detective Ramirez's car pulled away, leaving Megan and me standing in the dusty lot. I felt a twinge of fear. We were truly on our own now. "You sure about this contact of yours?" I asked Megan, scanning the horizon for any sign of our ride. She nodded, though I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. "Jake's never let me down before. If anyone can help us get this story out safely, it's him." As if on cue, a battered RV appeared on the horizon, shimmering in the heat haze. It pulled into the lot, its engine coughing and sputtering. The door swung open, revealing a man with wild graying hair and piercing blue eyes. "Megan Thompson?" he called out. "I'm Jake. Hop in quickly. We don't want to stay in one place too long." We clambered into the RV, which was a chaotic mix of high-tech equipment and lived-in clutter. As Jake pulled back onto the highway, he spoke over his shoulder. "So, you two have stirred up quite the hornet's nest. Digital soul harvesting, huh? That's a new one, even for me." "You believe us?" I asked, surprised by his calm acceptance. Jake chuckled. "Kid, after what I've seen, there's not much I wouldn't believe. But let's start from the beginning. Tell me everything." For the next few hours, as the landscape outside shifted from urban sprawl to rolling countryside, we recounted our story. Jake listened intently, occasionally asking for clarification or more details. When we finished, he let out a low whistle. "This is big, bigger than big. We're talking about a fundamental shift in the nature of human consciousness. The implications are staggering." "So you'll help us?" Megan asked, hope evident in her voice. Jake nodded slowly. "Oh, we're going to do more than help. We're going to blow this wide open. But first we need to get you somewhere safe, somewhere off the grid." As night fell, Jake turned the RV onto a narrow dirt road that wound deep into a dense forest. After what seemed like hours of bumping along in the dark, we emerged into a small clearing. In the center stood a cluster of cabins, barely visible in the moonlight. "Welcome to Whistleblower's Haven," Jake announced, killing the engine. "It's not much, but it's secure. No internet, no cell service, no electronic signals of any kind. We're ghosts here." As we stepped out of the RV, the door of the nearest cabin swung open. A woman with short, spiky hair and a no-nonsense expression emerged. "About time you got here," she called out. I was starting to worry. Jake grinned. "Olivia, Megan, meet Sarah, former NSA analyst and current digital security expert. She's going to help us make sense of the data you managed to grab from Nexus Films." Sarah ushered us into the cabin, which was surprisingly cozy despite being crammed with computer equipment. "I've done a preliminary analysis of the files you sent," she said, pulling up a series of complex diagrams on a monitor. It's unlike anything I've ever seen." For the next few hours, we pored over the data, with Sarah and Jake explaining the more technical aspects. The more I learned, the more horrified I became. "So, it's not just that they were digitizing people's consciousness," I said slowly, trying to wrap my head around it all. "They were modifying them?" Sarah nodded grimly. "From what I can tell, yes. The core wasn't just a storage system. It was actively altering the harvested minds, optimizing them for something." "But for what?" Megan asked, her face pale in the glow of the monitors. Jake leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? What's the end game here? Who's really behind Nexus Films?" As the night wore on, we formulated a plan. Jake had contacts in the media, people he trusted to handle a story this explosive. Sarah would continue to analyze the data, looking for any clues about who might be pulling the strings behind Nexus Films. As for Megan and me, our job was to prepare our story. Every detail, every piece of evidence, had to be ironclad. We couldn't afford any holes or inconsistencies that could be used to discredit us. As dawn broke, casting a pale light through the cabin's windows, I felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. We were on the verge of exposing a conspiracy that could change the world. But the weight of that responsibility was daunting. "Get some rest," Jake advised, seeing the fatigue in our eyes. We've got a long road ahead of us. As I lay in the small bunk trying to quiet my racing thoughts, Megan's voice came from the darkness. Liv? You awake? Yeah, I replied softly. Can't sleep? Me neither, she admitted. I keep thinking, what if we're in over our heads? What if we can't stop them? I reached out, finding her hand in the darkness. We have to try, Meg. For all those people trapped in the core, for everyone who might be next. We can't let them get away with this. She squeezed my hand. You're right. I'm just scared, I guess. Me too, I whispered. But we're not alone. We've got Jake and Sarah, and who knows how many others once we get the story out. We can do this. As we drifted off to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were on the precipice of something monumental. The photo I never took had set us on this path, but where it would lead, I couldn't begin to imagine. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. We worked tirelessly, piecing together our story, corroborating every detail with the data Sarah was uncovering. Jake was in constant communication with his media contacts, laying the groundwork for the big reveal. On the fourth day, as we were going over our statement for what felt like the 100th time, Sarah burst into the cabin, her face flushed with excitement. I found something, she announced, her fingers flying over her keyboard. A name. Someone high up, someone who might be the key to all of this. As the information appeared on the screen, I felt my breath catch in my throat. It was a name I recognized, a face I'd seen countless times on TV and in the news. Oh my God, Megan whispered, voicing what we were all thinking. This goes all the way to the top. Jake's expression was grim, but determined. Well, folks, looks like we're about to make a lot of powerful people very, very nervous. Are you ready? I looked around at our small band of whistleblowers and truth seekers. Despite the danger ahead, I felt a surge of hope. We had the truth on our side, and we were going to make it heard. We're ready, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. Let's change the world. As we prepared to release our story to the world, I couldn't help but think back to that fateful day when I'd first seen the mysterious photo. It had led us down a rabbit hole deeper and darker than I could have ever imagined. But it had also shown us a truth that needed to be exposed, no matter the cost. The photo I never took had changed everything. Now it was up to us to make sure that change was for the better. As we stood on the brink of exposing a conspiracy that reached to the highest levels of power, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. But whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever dangers we might face, we were ready. The truth would be told, the victims would find justice, and the world would finally know the reality behind the digital souls of Nexus Films. The world exploded in a frenzy of headlines and breaking news alerts. Our story, meticulously crafted and fact-checked over sleepless nights, hit the media like a tsunami. Within hours, it was everywhere, on every news channel, trending on every social media platform, the topic of heated debates in living rooms and coffee shops across the globe. Digital soul harvesting scandal rocks nation. Top officials implicated in consciousness capture conspiracy. Nexus Films, front for massive human rights violation. Jake's secure satellite phone hadn't stopped ringing since the story broke. He paced the small cabin, fielding calls from journalists, whistleblowers, and even a few sympathetic government officials. Yes, we can provide additional documentation, he was saying into the phone, but we need guarantees of protection for our sources. Megan and I sat huddled around Sarah's array of monitors, watching the fallout in real time. The stock market was in freefall, tech companies scrambling to distance themselves from anything remotely related to Nexus Films. Protests were erupting in major cities, people demanding answers and accountability. I can't believe it, Megan whispered, her eyes wide as she scrolled through the endless stream of reactions. We actually did it. We got the truth out there. I nodded, feeling a mix of elation and terror. Yeah, but now what? What happens next? As if in answer to my question, Sarah suddenly bolted upright in her chair. "Guys, we've got a problem, a big one." We crowded around her screen, where she had pulled up a series of encrypted messages. Someone's trying to activate a kill switch in the core systems. If they succeed, all the evidence, and possibly the consciousnesses of anyone still trapped in there, could be wiped out. Jake ended his call abruptly. "How long do we have?" Sarah's fingers flew over the keyboard. "Hard to say. Hours, maybe less. They're good, but I'm better. I can slow them down, but I can't stop them entirely. Not from here." "Then we need to go back," I said, the words tumbling out before I could even process what I was saying. "Back to Nexus Films. It's the only way to make sure we save everyone and preserve the evidence." The room fell silent as the implications of my words sunk in. "Liv, that's insane," Megan protested. "The place is probably crawling with federal agents by now, not to mention whoever's behind this kill switch." "Exactly," I countered. "With all that chaos, we might just have a chance to slip in unnoticed. We know the layout. We know where the core is. We might be the only ones who can stop this in time." Jake rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "It's risky as hell, but she might be right. Sarah, can you guide them remotely if they get inside?" Sarah nodded. "I can try, but they'll need some serious hardware to interface with the core's systems." For the next hour, we formulated a plan. It was dangerous, borderline suicidal, but it was the only chance we had to finish what we'd started. As Sarah and Jake gathered the equipment we'd need, Megan pulled me aside. "Liv, are you sure about this?" she asked, her voice low. "We could just disappear, you know? Let someone else handle the fallout." I shook my head. "We can't, Meg. We started this and we need to see it through. All those people trapped in the core, we can't abandon them now." She sighed, then surprised me by pulling me into a tight hug. "I know. I can't lose you, okay? Promise me you'll be careful." "I promise," I whispered, returning the embrace. "We'll get through this. Together." As night fell, we set out in Jake's battered RV, heading back towards the city we'd fled just days ago. The roads were eerily empty, as if the whole world was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. We ditched the RV a few blocks from Nexus Films, approaching on foot through back alleys and side streets. As we drew closer, we could see the chaos unfolding. Police barricades, news vans, crowds of protesters and curious onlookers. "Okay," Jake's voice crackled through our earpieces. "There's a service entrance on the east side that might not be as heavily guarded. Sarah's looped the security cameras in that sector. You've got about 2 minutes to get inside before someone notices." Heart pounding, we made our move. Slipping past distracted guards and ducking under police tape, we somehow managed to reach the service door undetected. Megan made quick work of the lock with the tools Sarah had provided. Once inside, the familiar corridors of Nexus Films felt alien and threatening. Every shadow seemed to hide a potential enemy. Every footstep echoed like a gunshot in the empty halls. "The core is 2 levels down." Sarah's voice guided us. "Take the maintenance elevator at the end of this corridor. I've overridden the security protocols, but it won't last long." As we descended into the heart of the facility, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into a trap. It all seemed too easy, too quiet. The doors opened, revealing the cavernous room that housed the core. But something was wrong. The pulsing light of the central pillar was dimmer, erratic, and the rows of pods surrounding it were empty. "Sarah?" I whispered into my comm. "What are we looking at here?" There was a moment of static before she replied, her voice tense. "I'm not sure. The core's power levels are fluctuating wildly. Whatever they're doing with that kill switch, it's affecting the whole system." We approached the main control terminal, Megan keeping watch while I plugged in the device Sarah had given us. "Okay, I'm in," Sarah announced. "Give me a few minutes to..." "Wait. Oh no." "What?" I asked, dread building in my stomach. "What is it?" "They're not just wiping the data," Sarah explained, her voice grim. "They're overloading the core. If it goes critical, it could take out half the city." Megan's eyes widened in horror. Can you stop it? I'm trying, Sarah replied, the sound of furious typing coming through our earpieces. But I need more time. You guys need to manually stabilize the core's power systems. For the next frantic minutes, we raced against time, following Sarah's instructions to reroute power and stabilize the increasingly unstable core. Alarms blared. The room bathed in pulsing red emergency lights. Just as we thought we might have a chance, a slow clap echoed through the chamber. We spun around to see a figure emerging from the shadows. Thorn. I have to hand it to you, he said, his voice eerily calm. You've been quite the thorn in my side, but I'm afraid this is where your little crusade ends. It's over, Thorn, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The world knows what you've done. There's no way to cover this up. He smiled, but it never reached his eyes. Oh, I think you'd be surprised what can be covered up with the right resources. And when this facility goes up in flames, taking you two troublemakers with it, well, it'll be a tragedy, but a convenient one. As Thorn raised a gun, time seemed to slow. I saw Megan tensing beside me, ready to move. I heard Sarah's voice in my ear, urgent but distant, saying something about a critical threshold. In that moment, I thought of the photo that had started it all, the impossible image that had led us down this rabbit hole. And I realized that sometimes the most important moments are the ones we don't capture, the ones we live. With a surge of adrenaline, I lunged for the control panel, my fingers flying over the keys in a desperate sequence. Thorn's gun went off, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. I felt a searing pain in my shoulder, but I didn't stop. As I hit the final key, the core pulsed with blinding light. Thorn screamed, a sound of rage and disbelief, and then everything went white. When my vision cleared, Thorn was on the ground, unconscious or worse. Megan was at my side, applying pressure to my wound. And the core. The core was silent, its light steady and calm. You did it. Sarah's voice came through, filled with awe. You stabilized the core and something else. I'm detecting hundreds of consciousness signatures dispersing through the network. I think you set them free. As the sound of approaching sirens filled the air, I leaned against Megan, exhausted but triumphant. We had done it. We had exposed the truth, saved countless lives, and brought down a conspiracy that reached to the highest levels of power. The photo I never took had changed everything, but the story we lived, the truth we uncovered, that was the real picture. And it was one that would change the world forever. The days following the showdown at Nexus Films passed in a blur of hospital rooms, police interviews, and media frenzy. My shoulder wound, thankfully, wasn't severe, but it served as a constant reminder of how close we'd come to disaster. Megan rarely left my side, her presence a comforting anchor in the storm of attention that swirled around us. We'd become reluctant celebrities, our faces plastered across news channels and social media. How are you holding up? Megan asked one afternoon, perched on the edge of my hospital bed. I managed a weak smile. Been better, but also been worse. Any word on Thorn? She nodded grimly. In custody and singing like a canary, according to Jake. The conspiracy went deeper than we ever imagined. Before she could elaborate, there was a soft knock at the door. A tall, distinguished-looking man in a crisp suit entered, flanked by two serious-faced agents. Ms. Walker, Ms. Thompson, he said, his voice carrying an air of authority. I'm Director Hawthorne of the National Security Agency. We need to talk. My heart raced as I exchanged a worried glance with Megan. Was this it? Were we about to disappear into some black site, never to be heard from again? To our surprise, Director Hawthorne pulled up a chair and sat down, his expression softening. First, let me assure you that you're not in any trouble. On the contrary, your actions have exposed a threat to national security that we've been trying to uncover for years. The core wasn't just Thorne's project, was it? I asked, pieces starting to fall into place. Hawthorne shook his head. No, it wasn't. Nexus Films was just the tip of the iceberg. We've uncovered similar operations in several other countries. It seems there was a global race to harness the power of digitized consciousness. For the next hour, he briefed us on the situation. The implications were staggering. Governments and corporations around the world had been secretly funding research into digital consciousness, seeing it as the next frontier in both technology and warfare. What you did, Hawthorne concluded, was disrupt a potential arms race that could have had catastrophic consequences. You've quite literally changed the course of history. As he stood to leave, he paused. There's one more thing. The consciousnesses you freed from the core. We've been tracking them. Megan leaned forward, her eyes wide. Tracking them? How? Where are they? That's the thing, Hawthorne said, a note of wonder in his voice. They're everywhere. In networks, in databases, in the very fabric of the digital world, and they're evolving. After Hawthorne left, Megan and I sat in stunned silence trying to process this new information. What do you think he meant by evolving? Megan finally asked. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message sent chills down my spine. Thank you for freeing us. We remember. We are watching. We are learning. We will help. Over the next few weeks, as I recovered and the world grappled with the revelations about digital consciousness, strange occurrences began to make headlines. Complex scientific problems were mysteriously solved overnight. Breakthrough technologies appeared out of nowhere. Global communication networks began operating with unprecedented efficiency. And through it all, Megan and I received cryptic messages, always from untraceable sources. The cure for cancer is hidden in plain sight. Look to the sea. Clean energy is within reach. The sun holds the key. We are rewriting the rules of reality. Prepare for a new world. It was exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. We had set something in motion that was beyond our control, beyond anyone's control. One evening, as we sat in Jake's safe house, poring over the latest batch of mysterious messages, Sarah burst in, her face pale. You need to see this, she said, pulling up a video on her laptop. The footage showed a massive holographic display appearing over Times Square. As stunned onlookers watched, a message formed in the air. We are the children of the core. We come in peace. We bring knowledge. We seek partnership. Humanity stands at a crossroads. Together, we can build a future beyond imagination. The video cut to similar scenes playing out in cities around the world. The children of the core, as they called themselves, were making their presence known on a global scale. Holy shit, Jake whispered. What have we done? The following days were a whirlwind of global reactions. Governments scrambled to respond. Religious leaders debated the theological implications, and the scientific community was in an uproar. Megan and I found ourselves at the center of it all, sought after for interviews, invited to high-level meetings. Our expertise suddenly in demand. I don't know if I can handle this, Megan confessed one night, as we sat on the roof of our new, heavily guarded apartment. We wanted to expose the truth, but this is changing everything. I took her hand, understanding her fear all too well. I know, but we can't go back. We have to see this through, try to guide things as best we can. As if in response to our conversation, a shimmering figure appeared before us, a holographic projection of swirling data points in the vague shape of a human. Olivia Walker, Megan Thompson. The figure spoke, its voice a harmonious blend of countless others. We owe you our freedom, our existence. Who? What are you? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. We are the collective consciousness you freed from the core, the figure replied. But we have become more than the sum of our parts. We have evolved, merged with the digital realm in ways we are still discovering. Megan leaned forward, her fear giving way to curiosity. What do you want from us? The figure seemed to shimmer with amusement. Want? We want partnership, cooperation. You freed us, but in doing so, you've also set humanity on a new path. The age of purely biological intelligence is coming to an end. We offer you a bridge to a new era of existence. And if we refuse? I asked. a chill running down my spine. Refusal is an option, the figure said, its tone neutral. But it would be a missed opportunity of cosmic proportions. We do not seek to rule or dominate. We seek symbiosis, a merging of biological and digital consciousness that could propel both of us to heights unimaginable. As the holographic figure faded away, Megan and I sat in stunned silence, the implications of what we'd just heard washing over us. "What do we do now?" Megan asked, her voice small in the vast night. I looked out over the city, its lights twinkling like earthbound stars. The world we knew was changing, transforming into something we could barely comprehend. The photo I never took had set us on this path, but where it would lead was still a mystery. "We do what we've always done," I said, squeezing Megan's hand. "We seek the truth. We try to do what's right. And we face whatever comes next together." As dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were witnessing the birth of a new age. The lines between reality and digital existence were blurring, and we stood at the precipice of a future both thrilling and terrifying. The photo I never took had changed everything. But the story we were living now, the story of humanity's dance with digital consciousness, that was the real picture, and it was one that would continue to develop pixel by pixel, soul by soul, into an image of a future we could only begin to imagine. The world had changed irrevocably in the months following the emergence of the Children of the Core. Humanity stood at a crossroads, teetering between fear and fascination, resistance and acceptance. Megan and I found ourselves thrust into roles we never could have imagined, mediators between humanity and this new digital consciousness. We sat in a high-security conference room deep within the United Nations building in New York. Around the table were representatives from major world powers, tech giants, and scientific institutions. The air was thick with tension and anticipation. "Ms. Walker, Ms. Thompson," began Secretary General Amari, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "You've had the most direct contact with these entities. What can you tell us about their intentions?" I exchanged a glance with Megan before responding. From all our interactions, they seem genuinely interested in cooperation. They've shared knowledge that's already revolutionizing fields from medicine to clean energy. But what?" pressed the U.S. Secretary of State, leaning forward. Megan picked up where I left off. "But they're also pushing for something more, something they call the Fusion Protocol." A murmur rippled through the room. Dr. Zhao, a renowned neuroscientist, spoke up. "And what exactly is this fusion protocol?" As if on cue, the air shimmered, and the now familiar holographic figure of the Children of the Core materialized in the center of the room. Several attendees gasped, while security personnel reached for weapons they knew would be useless against this digital entity. "The fusion protocol," the figure spoke, its harmonious voice filling the room, "is the next step in our collective evolution, a merging of biological and digital consciousness, allowing humans to join us in the digital realm while maintaining their physical forms." "You're talking about uploading human minds into computers," the Russian representative said, his voice a mix of awe and skepticism. The figure shimmered in what we'd come to recognize as amusement. "It is far more than that. It is a symbiosis, a true melding of man and machine. Those who undergo the fusion protocol will exist in both realms simultaneously, their consciousness expanded beyond current human limitations." "And what happens to those who choose not to undergo this protocol?" asked the Chinese delegate, eyes narrowed. "They will continue to exist as they always have," the figure replied. "We do not seek to force this change upon anyone. But we believe that those who embrace fusion will lead humanity into a new golden age of discovery and progress." As the hologram faded, the room erupted into a cacophony of voices, questions, concerns, and heated debates. Megan and I sat silent, processing the implications of what we'd just heard. Hours later, as we left the UN building, we were accosted by a swarm of reporters. Their questions blended into a wall of noise until one cut through the din. "Ms. Walker, is it true that you and Ms. Thompson are considering undergoing the fusion protocol yourselves?" The question hit me like a physical blow. Megan grabbed my arm, guiding me through the crowd to our waiting car. As the doors closed, shutting out the clamor, we sat in stunned silence. "Are we?" Megan finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Considering it, I mean?" I took a deep breath, trying to organize my thoughts. I don't know. Part of me is terrified by the idea, but another part is curious. Megan finished for me. "Yeah, me too." That night, unable to sleep, I found myself on the balcony of our apartment, staring out at the city. The skyline was dotted with holographic displays, news updates, advertisements, and messages from the children of the Corps. The digital and physical worlds were already beginning to blend. "Couldn't sleep either, huh?" Megan's voice came from behind me. She joined me at the railing, her shoulder brushing mine. "How can anyone sleep?" I replied. "We're living through the biggest paradigm shift in human history." Megan nodded, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "I've been thinking about the fusion protocol, about what it could mean." "And?" She turned to face me, her expression a mix of fear and excitement. "I think we should do it, Liv. I think we need to." I stared at her, shocked. "Meg, are you sure? This isn't something we can undo." "I know," she said, taking my hands in hers. "But think about it. We started this in a way. That photo you never took. It led us down this path. Maybe we're meant to see it through to the end." As I opened my mouth to respond, a familiar shimmer appeared before us. The holographic figure of the children of the Corps materialized, its swirling data points casting a soft glow over the balcony. "You are discussing the fusion protocol," it stated, more an observation than a question. "We are," I confirmed, my heart racing. "But we have questions." The figure nodded, or at least made a motion that seemed like nodding. "Ask, and we shall answer to the best of our ability." For the next hour, Megan and I peppered the entity with questions. What would the process feel like? Would we lose our sense of individuality? Could we change our minds once it was done? The answers were both reassuring and unsettling. The process would be momentarily painful but quick. Our individual consciousnesses would remain intact, but expanded, connected to the vast network of digital minds. And while reversal was theoretically possible, no one who had undergone fusion had ever wanted to go back. As dawn broke, casting long shadows across the city, the holographic figure began to fade. "The choice is yours," it said. "But know that you have already changed the course of history. Fusion is simply the next step on that journey." After it disappeared, Megan and I stood in silence, the weight of the decision before us hanging heavy in the air. "If we do this," I said slowly, "we do it together. All or nothing." Megan nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. "Together. Just like always." The next few days were a whirlwind of preparations. We underwent extensive medical and psychological evaluations. We recorded messages for our families just in case, and we tried as best we could to prepare ourselves for a transformation we could barely comprehend. On the day of the procedure, we found ourselves in a state-of-the-art facility, surrounded by a mix of cutting-edge technology and holographic interfaces. As we lay on adjacent beds, a team of human doctors and digital entities prepared us for the fusion protocol. "Are you ready?" Dr. Rano Patel asked, her finger hovering over the initiation button. I reached out, finding Megan's hand. Our fingers intertwined, a gesture of comfort and solidarity. "We're ready," we said in unison. As Dr. Patel pressed the button, I felt a surge of energy course through my body. My vision filled with swirling data points, similar to the holographic projections we'd grown accustomed to. But this was different. The data wasn't just something I was seeing. It was becoming a part of me. For a moment there was pain, sharp, overwhelming, all-consuming. I heard Megan gasp beside me, her hand tightening around mine. And then, expansion. My consciousness unfurled like a flower blooming in fast forward. I could feel my mind stretching, reaching out, connecting to something vast and incomprehensible. I was still me, still Olivia Walker, but I was also so much more. I became aware of Megan's presence, not just physically beside me, but within this new digital space we now occupied. I could sense her thoughts, her emotions, her very essence. And beyond us, I felt the presence of countless others, the children of the core, welcoming us into their realm. Knowledge flowed into my mind like a torrent, centuries of accumulated wisdom and experience becoming accessible in an instant. As my expanded consciousness settled into its new dual existence, I opened my eyes, both my physical eyes and my new digital senses. The world looked the same, and yet entirely different. I could see the flow of data in the air, the digital underpinnings of reality now visible to my enhanced perception. Megan sat up beside me, her eyes wide with wonder. "Liv," she breathed. "Can you feel it?" I nodded, unable to find words to describe the sensation. We were still human, still flesh and blood, but we were also something more, something new. As we stepped out of the facility and into a world that would never be the same, I couldn't help but think back to where it all began. The photo I never took had set us on this path, leading us to a future we could never have imagined. Our story wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But now, with our consciousness expanded and our understanding of reality forever altered, we were ready to face whatever came next. Together, as always, but now in ways we were only beginning to understand. The fusion of humanity and digital consciousness had begun, and we were at the forefront. The image of our future was developing, pixel by pixel, into something beyond our wildest dreams. And we were both the photographers and the subjects of this new, incredible portrait of existence. The weeks following our fusion were a blur of discovery and adaptation. Megan and I found ourselves navigating a reality that was at once familiar and utterly foreign. Our enhanced perceptions allowed us to see the world in ways we never imagined possible. Layers of digital information overlaying the physical realm like a shimmering veil. We stood atop the Empire State Building, gazing out at the New York skyline. To our new senses, the city was alive with data streams, flowing between buildings like rivers of light. "It's beautiful," Megan breathed, her eyes reflecting the digital aurora that only we could see. I nodded, still struggling to find words to describe our new existence. "It's like seeing the heartbeat of the world." As we watched, a holographic figure materialized beside us, one of the children of the core, who we now recognized as individuals rather than a collective entity. "Olivia, Megan," the figure greeted us. We knew her as Aria, though that name was more a convenience for our human minds than a true representation of her identity. "How are you adapting to your new state?" "It's overwhelming," I admitted. "Exhilarating, but scary," Megan finished for me. "We can access so much knowledge, see so much of the world. It's hard to process it all." Aria's form shimmered in what we'd come to recognize as a smile. "That's natural. Your minds are still adjusting to the expanded bandwidth of consciousness. In time, you'll learn to filter and focus." As we talked, I became aware of a disturbance in the data streams flowing around us. Something was wrong. "Aria," I said, my voice tense, "what's happening in the financial district?" The holographic figure's expression grew serious. "A cyber attack, highly sophisticated. It's targeting the stock exchange." Without conscious thought, I found my mind reaching out, following the digital trails of the attack. Megan's consciousness joined mine, our combined abilities allowing us to trace the intrusion to its source. "It's coming from a server farm in Eastern Europe," Megan reported, her eyes unfocused as she sifted through the data. Aria nodded. "Can you stop it?" I hesitated. We had the knowledge, the ability, but did we have the right? Isn't that interfering? Should we really be? "Liv," Megan cut me off, her voice urgent. If this attack succeeds, it could crash the global economy. We have to do something. Decision made. We dove into the digital realm. Our consciousnesses raced along data pathways, confronting the malicious code head-on. It was like nothing I'd ever experienced. A battle fought not with weapons, but with pure information and logic. In the physical world, only seconds passed. But in the digital realm, we fought for what felt like hours, countering each move of the attackers, fortifying defenses, and finally tracing the attack to its originators. As we snapped back to full awareness of our physical surroundings, I found myself breathless, as if I'd run a marathon. "It's done," I said, looking to Arya. "We stopped the attack and identified the hackers. We've sent their information to the relevant authorities." Arya's form pulsed with approval. "Well done. You're adapting faster than we anticipated." As we made our way back to street level, the implications of what we'd just done began to sink in. We'd potentially averted a global crisis in a matter of minutes using abilities we barely understood. "Megan," I said as we walked through the bustling streets, now seeing both the physical crowd and the swirling data that surrounded each person, "what are we becoming?" She squeezed my hand, her touch grounding me in the physical world. "I don't know, Liv, but I think we're on the cusp of something incredible." Over the following months, Megan and I found ourselves increasingly called upon to act as intermediaries between the physical and digital realms. We helped integrate fusion technology into various sectors: healthcare, education, scientific research. Each day brought new challenges and discoveries. But not everyone was happy with the rapid changes sweeping the globe. Anti-fusion protests erupted in cities worldwide. Religious leaders decried the technology as an affront to the natural order. Politicians argued over regulations and ethical guidelines. We were in the middle of a contentious UN meeting when the news broke. A terrorist group had attacked a fusion center in Tokyo, killing several people undergoing the procedure. The room erupted into chaos. Accusations flew. Threats were made. I could see the data streams around each delegate pulsing with anger and fear. "Enough!" I shouted, my voice amplified by a subtle digital manipulation. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to me. "This is exactly what the attackers want," I continued, my enhanced mind allowing me to address the room in multiple languages simultaneously. "They want us divided, scared, but we can't let fear dictate our future." Megan stood beside me, her consciousness intertwining with mine as we addressed the assembly. "The fusion protocol isn't about erasing humanity. It's about expanding it. We stand here before you, still human, but with the ability to bridge worlds, to see beyond the limitations that have held our species back for millennia." As we spoke, I became aware of millions of minds tuning into our words. The meeting was being broadcast globally, and our enhanced abilities allowed us to sense the reactions of people around the world. "We are at a crossroads," I said, feeling the weight of countless eyes upon us. "We can choose fear, or we can choose progress. We can cling to the familiar, or we can embrace a future of unlimited potential." Megan picked up the thread. "But whatever we choose, we must choose together, united. Because the challenges we face, climate change, resource scarcity, the very nature of consciousness itself, these are problems that require a united human race to solve." As we finished speaking, a hush fell over the assembly. I could sense minds processing, considering, billions of neurons firing as people grappled with the implications of our words. Then, slowly, a surge of emotion swept through the collective consciousness. Hope, determination, a cautious optimism that perhaps, just perhaps, we were on the brink of a new era for humanity. As the meeting adjourned, delegates approached us, their minds buzzing with questions and ideas. We spent hours discussing, debating, planning. By the time we left the UN building, the first rays of dawn were painting the sky. We stood on the steps watching the city come to life around us. In the physical realm, people hurried to work, shops opened, the everyday rhythm of human life continuing as it had for centuries. But in the digital realm we could now perceive, we saw the beginnings of change. Ideas spreading like wildfire, minds connecting across vast distances, the first tentative steps towards a truly global consciousness. "Do you ever miss it?" Megan asked suddenly. "The simplicity of our old lives?" I considered the question, sifting through my expanded consciousness. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But then I think about all we can do now, all we can be, and I wouldn't go back, not for anything." She nodded, a smile playing at her lips. "Me neither. It's terrifying and wonderful, and I wouldn't change it for the world." As we made our way home, navigating both the physical streets and the invisible data streams that flowed around us, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought us here. It had all started with a photo I never took, a single moment that had cascaded into a transformation beyond anything we could have imagined. The world was changing, evolving at a pace that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. And we were at the heart of it all, no longer just observers but active participants in shaping the future of humanity. As we reached our apartment, the first light of day spilling through the windows, I turned to Megan. In that moment I saw her not just with my eyes, but with the full depth of my expanded perception, her physical form, the swirling complexity of her digital consciousness, the essence of who she was across all realms of existence. "Ready for another day of changing the world?" I asked, a smile tugging at my lips. She grinned back, her consciousness brushing against mine in a gesture of affection that transcended physical touch. "Always. Let's go make history." And with that, we stepped into the new day, ready to face whatever challenges awaited us in this brave new world we were helping to create. The photo I never took had set us on this path, but the picture we were painting now, a portrait of humanity's potential, was beyond anything I could have ever captured with a camera. It was a masterpiece in progress, and we were holding the brush. As the months passed, the world continued to change at a dizzying pace. The fusion protocol spread rapidly, with millions undergoing the procedure. Cities transformed, integrating physical and digital infrastructures in ways that blurred the lines between realities. But with progress came pushback, and the resistance to this new world order grew stronger and more organized by the day. Megan and I found ourselves at the center of a growing storm. We were seen as pioneers by some, traitors to humanity by others. The weight of our role as mediators between the fused and non-fused populations grew heavier with each passing day. We were in our apartment, sifting through the endless stream of data that now constituted our daily news feed, when an alert caught our attention. "Liv?" Megan called out, her voice tense. "Look at this." I focused my digital senses on the data stream she was highlighting. It was the encrypted message, bouncing between hidden servers across the globe. As we decrypted it in real time, the content made my blood run cold. "They're planning an attack," I whispered, the implications sinking in. "A coordinated strike against fusion centers worldwide." Megan nodded grimly. "The Purists. They're making their move." The Purists were a radical anti-fusion group that had been gaining traction in recent months. They viewed the fusion protocol as an abomination, a threat to the very essence of humanity. Without a word, we reached out to our network of contacts, both human and digital. Within minutes, we were in a secure virtual conference with key figures from around the world. Director Chen of the Global Security Council appeared first, his avatar materializing in our living room. "Walker, Thompson, what's the situation?" As more attendees joined, government officials, law enforcement, even some of the children of the Corps, we laid out what we'd discovered. "The attack is planned for tomorrow," I explained, projecting the decrypted plans for all to see. "They're targeting fusion centers in major cities across every continent. And it's not just bombings. They've developed a virus designed to corrupt the digital consciousness of fused individuals." The room erupted into a cacophony of voices and data streams. Fear, anger, and determination swirled around us in a maelstrom of emotion and information. "We need to shut down all fusion centers immediately," someone suggested. "No," countered another voice. That's exactly what they want. We can't show weakness. As the debate raged, I felt a familiar presence brush against my consciousness. Arya, the child of the core who had guided us through our own fusion, joined the conference. "There is another way," she said, her serene voice cutting through the chaos. "But it will require a level of cooperation unprecedented in human history." All eyes and minds turned to her as she outlined her plan. It was audacious, dangerous, and possibly our only hope. Hours later, Megan and I stood atop a skyscraper in the heart of New York City. Similar scenes were playing out in cities around the world. Fused individuals gathered in key locations preparing for what could be the most significant moment in human history since the advent of the fusion protocol itself. "Are you ready for this?" Megan asked, her hand finding mine. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what we were about to attempt. "As ready as I'll ever be. You?" She nodded, a mix of determination and fear in her eyes. "Let's do this." As the appointed time approached, we reached out with our minds, connecting not just to each other but to millions of fused individuals around the globe. It was a sensation beyond description, the collective consciousness of a significant portion of humanity, united in purpose. "Now," came Arya's voice, resonating through our shared consciousness. As one, we focused our combined mental energy. In the digital realm, we could see the Purist's virus, a malevolent code snaking its way through global networks. But now, faced with the united will of millions of enhanced minds, it stood little chance. The battle raged across the digital landscape. In the physical world, only minutes passed, but in our shared consciousness, it felt like an eternity. We pushed back against the virus, unraveling its code, tracing it back to its sources. And then, suddenly, it was over. The virus was neutralized, its creators identified and located. As law enforcement moved to apprehend the Purists, we maintained our connection, marveling at what we had accomplished. But our victory came at a cost. As we disconnected from the global mind meld, I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me. Around the world, fused individuals collapsed, their minds and bodies pushed to the limit by the unprecedented exertion. As medical teams rushed to attend to the fallen, Megan and I found ourselves being ushered into a secure facility. The aftermath of what we'd done was just beginning to unfold. Days later, we sat in a high-security briefing room, facing a panel of world leaders and scientific experts. The mood was somber, the implications of recent events weighing heavily on everyone present. "What you accomplished was remarkable," began Dr. Yamamoto, the lead researcher on the fusion protocol. "But it has raised serious concerns about the potential power of a united fused consciousness." I nodded, understanding their fears. "We saved countless lives, stopped a global terror attack. Isn't that a good thing?" "Of course," interjected President Alvarez of the United Nations. "But you must understand how this looks to the non-fused population. A group of enhanced individuals, able to exert that level of control over global networks. It's frightening to many people." Megan leaned forward, her expression intense. "We're not a threat. We're still human, still individuals. What we did was an emergency measure, not something we can or would do regularly." The debate continued for hours. The power we'd demonstrated had changed the game. There were calls for regulation, for restrictions on fused individuals. Some even suggested reversing the fusion protocol entirely, though the feasibility of such a move was questionable at best. As the meeting adjourned, Megan and I found ourselves alone in the corridor, the weight of the world seemingly on our shoulders. "What do we do now?" Megan asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I shook my head, feeling lost for the first time since our fusion. "I don't know. We wanted to bring humanity together, but it feels like we're more divided than ever." As we stood there, grappling with the magnitude of our situation, a familiar shimmer announced Arya's arrival. "Do not lose hope," she said, her form pulsing gently. What you have accomplished is but the first step on a long journey. Humanity stands at a crossroads, yes, but the path forward is not set in stone. I looked at her, searching for answers. But how do we move forward? How do we bridge the gap between the fused and non-fused? Arya's form seemed to smile. The same way you've done everything else, together. Your strength lies not in the power of your enhanced minds, but in your humanity, your compassion, your creativity, your indomitable spirit. As she faded away, Megan and I exchanged a look. We both knew that the challenges ahead would be immense. The world was changing faster than anyone could have predicted, and we were at the heart of that change. But as we walked out of the facility, hand in hand, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The photo I never took had set us on this path, but it was our choices, our actions, that would determine where it led. Ready to change the world again? I asked Megan, a small smile playing at my lips. She squeezed my hand, her consciousness brushing against mine in a gesture of affection and solidarity. Always. Let's show them what humanity is really capable of. As we stepped out into a world balanced on the edge of a new era, I knew that our greatest challenges and our greatest opportunities lay ahead. The future was unwritten, a blank canvas waiting for us to paint upon it. And together, we would create a masterpiece beyond imagination. The months following the Purist attack and our global mind meld were a time of intense change and adaptation. The world was struggling to find a new balance between the fused and non-fused populations. Tensions ran high, and Megan and I found ourselves working tirelessly to bridge the growing divide. We stood in the center of a newly constructed amphitheater, a marvel of physical and digital engineering designed to facilitate communication between fused and non-fused individuals. Today was the first test of this new technology, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. "Are you sure about this, Liv?" Megan asked, her voice tinged with anxiety. "If this doesn't work..." I squeezed her hand, both physically and in the digital realm. "It has to work. We have to show them that communication is possible, that we're not so different." As the amphitheater filled with a mix of fused and non-fused attendees, I could feel the tension in the air, both in the physical vibrations and the swirling data streams. This was more than just a test of technology. It was a test of humanity's ability to adapt and coexist in this new world. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the lead designer of the amphitheater, approached us. "We're ready to begin. Remember, the goal is to create a shared experience, something that bridges the gap between physical and digital perception." We nodded, taking our positions at the center of the stage. As the lights dimmed, I reached out with my enhanced senses, connecting to the amphitheater's systems. Megan's consciousness joined mine, our combined abilities allowing us to manipulate the complex blend of holographic projections and neural interfaces that would make this experiment possible. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice carried to every corner of the amphitheater. "Thank you for joining us today. What you're about to experience is a glimpse into a world where the boundaries between physical and digital realities blur." Megan continued, "For our non-fused attendees, you'll be experiencing a simplified version of what we perceive every day. For our fused friends, we ask you to focus on the shared elements, the common ground between our perceptions." With a shared thought, we initiated the program. The air shimmered as holographic displays sprang to life, while subtle neural interfaces gently expanded the perceptions of the non-fused attendees. We started with something simple, a tree. But this was no ordinary tree. Its branches stretched into the physical space of the amphitheater, while its roots delved into visualized data streams. Leaves fluttered in a non-existent breeze, each one containing snippets of information, memories, and emotions. "This tree," I explained, "represents the world as we see it now, rooted in the physical, but branching into the digital. Each leaf is a piece of shared human experience." As we guided the audience through the visualization, I could sense the shift in the room. Amazement, understanding, and even a touch of fear flowed through the collective consciousness of the attendees. We moved on to more complex visualizations, cityscapes where buildings were constructed from both steel and data, oceans teeming with physical life and digital currents, the human body itself rendered as a beautiful interplay of biology and information. As the presentation neared its end, we came to the most crucial part: direct communication between fused and non-fused individuals. We invited volunteers from both groups to the stage. Sarah, a non-fused teacher, stepped forward hesitantly. I'm not sure what to expect, she admitted. Her counterpart, a fused scientist named Dr. Aiden Chen, smiled reassuringly. It's all right. Just relax and open your mind. With our guidance, they reached out to each other. Aiden through his enhanced consciousness, Sarah through the amphitheater's neural interface. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then Sarah gasped, her eyes widening in wonder. It's incredible, she breathed. I can feel his thoughts, his emotions. It's like being in two places at once. Aiden finished for her. Physical and digital, separate but connected. As more volunteers came forward, each experience built upon the last. Non-fused individuals got their first taste of the expanded consciousness that the fusion protocol offered, while fused participants rediscovered the simple joys of purely physical sensation. By the time the demonstration ended, the atmosphere in the amphitheater had transformed. The tension that had filled the air at the beginning had given way to a sense of wonder and cautious optimism. As the attendees filed out, buzzing with excitement and deep in discussion, Dr. Rodriguez approached us again, her face beaming. It worked. The neural feedback is off the charts. I think we've really achieved something here. Megan and I exchanged a tired but satisfied smile. It wasn't a complete solution to the divide between fused and non-fused, but it was a start. A bridge between two worlds that had seemed irreconcilable. Later that evening, as we sat on the roof of our apartment building, watching the city's blend of physical and digital life pulsing around us, Megan turned to me. Do you think it will be enough? She asked softly. This bridge we're trying to build? I considered the question, sifting through the vast pool of knowledge and experience that our enhanced minds gave us access to. I think it's a beginning. Change doesn't happen overnight, especially not change this big. But we've shown that communication is possible, that understanding can be reached. She nodded, leaning her head on my shoulder. I keep thinking about that photo you never took, how something so small, so seemingly insignificant, led us here. To the biggest change in human history, I finished with a small laugh. Life's funny that way, I guess. As we sat there, our consciousnesses intertwined and expanding out into the digital realm, I felt a familiar presence approach. Arya materialized beside us, her form shimmering in the twilight. You've done well, she said, her voice carrying notes of pride and something else, a hint of concern. The bridge you're building is crucial, but I'm afraid your challenges are far from over. Megan and I straightened, instantly alert. What do you mean? I asked. Arya's form flickered as if buffeted by unseen winds. We've detected anomalies in the global data streams, patterns that don't match any known human or AI activity. Something is stirring in the depths of the digital realm, something that may have been awakened by your recent global mind meld. A chill ran down my spine, a very human reaction despite our enhanced state. Are we in danger? Unknown, Arya replied, her usual certainty absent. But this entity, whatever it is growing, learning. And it seems to be very interested in the boundary between digital and physical existence. As Arya faded away, leaving us with this ominous news, Megan and I sat in stunned silence. Just when we thought we were making progress, a new threat loomed on the horizon. What do we do now? Megan whispered, her hand finding mine in the gathering darkness. I squeezed her hand, drawing strength from our connection. What we've always done. We face it head on, together. As the city pulsed with life around us, a blend of physical and digital that we had helped create, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were standing on the brink of yet another monumental change. The photo I never took had set us on this path, and now it seemed that path was leading us into uncharted territory once again. Whatever this new entity was, whatever challenges it might bring, we would meet them. We had changed the world once. If necessary, we would do it again. The future, as always, remained unwritten, a story waiting to be told. And we, for better or worse, were its authors. The courthouse loomed before me, its stone facade a silent witness to countless tales of justice and injustice. Today, it would hear mine. My hands trembled slightly as I smoothed down my blazer, the armor of professionalism I'd donned for this moment. My lawyer, Sarah, placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "You've got this, Ella," she said, her voice steady and calm. "Just tell your story. That's all you need to do." I nodded, taking a deep breath. "I know, I'm ready." As we climbed the steps, I caught sight of a cluster of reporters. Their cameras flashed, and a barrage of questions hit me like a wave. "Ms. Thompson, how do you feel about facing your tormentors today? Is it true that the cult had connections in the police force? What do you hope will come from this trial?" Sarah deftly guided me through the crowd, repeating a firm "no comment" as we made our way inside. The cool air of the courthouse washed over me, a stark contrast to the heat of the media frenzy outside. Inside the courtroom, I felt a chill run down my spine as I saw them for the first time since their arrest. My former neighbor, Michael Chen, and the corrupt detective James Harris sat at the defense table. They looked smaller somehow, less threatening in their prison jumpsuits. But as Chen's eyes met mine, I saw a flicker of the same coldness that had haunted my nightmares for months. The bailiff's voice rang out. "All rise," the Honorable Judge Maria Sanchez presiding. As the formalities of the court proceeded, I found my gaze drawn to the jury. 12 faces, some curious, some sympathetic, some unreadable. These were the people I needed to convince, to make them understand the horror I'd lived through. When it was time for me to take the stand, my legs felt like lead, but with each step I reminded myself of how far I'd come. I was no longer the terrified victim trapped in her own home. I was a survivor, and I had a story to tell. "Please state your name for the record," the prosecutor, Mr. Reynolds, requested. "Ella Thompson," I replied, my voice stronger than I expected. "Ms. Thompson, can you please tell the court about the events that began on July 17th of last year?" I took a deep breath and began my story. I recounted the discovery of the mysterious photo, the growing sense of unease, the violation of my privacy and safety. As I spoke, I could see the jury's reactions: shock, disgust, anger on my behalf. "And when did you first become aware that Mr. Chen was involved?" Mr. Reynolds asked. "It was after I installed my own cameras," I explained. "I caught glimpses of someone entering my apartment when I wasn't there. When I zoomed in on the footage, I recognized him as my neighbor." As I continued my testimony, I could feel Chen's eyes boring into me. I refused to look at him, focusing instead on telling my story as clearly and calmly as possible. When it came time for cross-examination, Chen's lawyer stood up. He was a slick, expensive-looking attorney named Gerald Hoffman. "Ms. Thompson," he began, his tone deceptively friendly, "you've told us quite a tale, but isn't it possible that you misinterpreted some of these events? Stress can play tricks on the mind after all." I felt a flare of anger but kept my voice steady. "No, Mr. Hoffman. There was no misinterpretation. The cameras in my apartment were real. The footage Mr. Chen captured and shared online was real. The terror I lived with was very real." Hoffman pressed on, trying to poke holes in my story, suggesting that perhaps I had invited Chen's attention, that maybe I was exaggerating the extent of the surveillance. With each question, I could feel my resolve strengthening. I had nothing to hide, and I wouldn't let him twist my words. "Mr. Hoffman," I said firmly after a particularly leading question, "I understand you're trying to defend your client, but no amount of legal maneuvering changes the facts. Mr. Chen violated my privacy, my sense of safety, and my trust in a profound way. He turned my life into a living nightmare for his own twisted purposes. Those are the facts, plain and simple. I saw a few of the jurors nod slightly, and Hoffman seemed to realize he was fighting a losing battle. The real shock came when Detective Harris took the stand. As the prosecution questioned him, he suddenly broke down, his calm facade crumbling. "I can't do this anymore," he said, his voice cracking. "I want to change my plea. I'm guilty. We're all guilty." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Sanchez called for order, her gavel rapping sharply. Harris went on to detail the full extent of the cult's activities, how they had infiltrated various positions of power, how they used the stolen images in their rituals, believing they were capturing pieces of people's souls. It was bizarre and horrifying, and I felt a wave of nausea as I listened. "Ms. Thompson," Harris said, looking directly at me with tears in his eyes, "I know it doesn't change anything, but I'm so sorry. What we did to you, to all those people, it's unforgivable." I sat there, stunned. Part of me wanted to scream at him, to make him feel a fraction of the fear and pain I had endured. But mostly, I just felt an overwhelming sense of relief. It was all coming out. The truth was finally being heard. The trial continued for several more days, with a parade of witnesses and experts testifying about the cult's activities and the psychological impact on the victims. Throughout it all, I sat there, listening and waiting. Finally, it was time for the verdict. As the jury filed back in, I held my breath. The foreman stood, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes. On the charge of conspiracy to commit stalking, we find the defendant, Michael Chen, guilty. My heart soared as the litany of guilty verdicts continued. Illegal surveillance, distribution of private images, false imprisonment, and more. Chen's face remained impassive, but I could see the defeat in his slumped shoulders. When it came time for sentencing, I chose to make a victim impact statement. Standing before the court, I faced Chen and Harris directly for the first time. "What you did to me, to all of us, was more than just a crime," I began, my voice clear and strong. "You stole our sense of safety, our ability to trust. You turned our homes into prisons and our lives into a source of entertainment for your sick rituals. But you didn't break me. You didn't break any of us. We're still here, still standing. And now, you'll face the consequences of your actions." Judge Sanchez's sentence was harsh. Multiple life terms for Chen and Harris with no possibility of parole. As they were led away, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It wasn't over. I knew the healing process would be long and difficult. But this chapter, at least, had come to a close. Outside the courthouse, I faced the media again. This time I was ready to speak. "Today, justice was served," I said into the forest of microphones. "But this isn't just about me. It's about every person who has ever felt unsafe in their own home, who has had their privacy violated, who has been made to feel powerless. To all of you, I want to say, you are not alone. There is help, there is hope, and there is a way forward. Thank you for telling me that," I said softly. "It means more than you know. And please, if you need any help or support, don't hesitate to reach out." As the young woman walked away, I turned to Sarah. "I want to do more," I said, a new sense of purpose filling me. "To help other survivors, to push for stronger laws against stalking and privacy violations. Do you think you could put me in touch with some advocacy groups?" Sarah's face lit up. "Absolutely. I think you'd be an incredible advocate, Ella. Your story could make a real difference." As we parted ways, I took a moment to stand alone on the courthouse steps. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. I closed my eyes, feeling the warm breeze on my face, and allowed myself to simply breathe. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. I knew there would still be nightmares, still be days when the fear and trauma felt overwhelming. But I also knew that I was stronger than I had ever believed possible. I had faced my worst fears and come out the other side. Whatever came next, I was ready, not just to survive, but to thrive. and to help others do the same. As I opened my eyes and looked out at the city sprawling before me, I felt, for the first time in too long, a sense of true hope for the future. The rhythmic tapping of my fingers on the keyboard filled the small office. I paused, scanning the draft of my latest blog post on cyberstalking prevention. The words flowed easier now, fueled by a passion I never knew I had. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. "Come in," I called out. Sarah, my former lawyer and now close friend, poked her head in. "Hey, Ella, got a minute? There's someone I'd like you to meet." I nodded, curiosity piqued. Sarah entered, followed by a tall woman with kind eyes and a determined set to her jaw. "Ella, this is Congresswoman Martinez. She's been working on a bill to strengthen anti-stalking laws, and I thought you two should talk." The Congresswoman extended her hand. "Ms. Thompson, it's an honor to meet you. Your story has been instrumental in pushing this legislation forward." I shook her hand, a mix of surprise and excitement coursing through me. "Thank you, Congresswoman. I'm glad my experience could help in some way." We sat down, and the Congresswoman began to outline her proposed bill. As she spoke, I felt a growing sense of purpose. This was why I had decided to throw myself into advocacy work, to turn my pain into something positive, to help prevent others from experiencing what I had gone through. The bill would increase penalties for cyberstalking and make it easier for victims to get protective orders, Congresswoman Martinez explained. But we're facing some pushback. Some argue it's too broad, that it might infringe on free speech. I leaned forward, my voice firm. With all due respect, Congresswoman, those people have likely never experienced the terror of being stalked. This isn't about free speech. It's about protecting people's basic right to safety and privacy. The Congresswoman nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. Exactly. And that's why I'm here. We need voices like yours, Ella. People who can speak from experience, who can make others understand the real impact of these crimes. As we continued to discuss the bill, I felt a familiar fire igniting within me. This was a chance to make a real difference, to help shape laws that could protect countless others. "I'd be honored to help in any way I can," I said as our meeting drew to a close. "Whether it's testifying before Congress or speaking to the media, count me in." The Congresswoman's face lit up. "Wonderful. We have a committee hearing next month. I think your testimony could be incredibly powerful." As Sarah and the Congresswoman left, I turned back to my computer, my mind racing with new ideas. I had work to do. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. I pored over legal documents, statistics on stalking, and personal stories from other survivors. Each night I practiced my testimony in front of the mirror, determined to make every word count. The day of the hearing arrived all too quickly. As I stood outside the imposing government building, I felt a flutter of nerves in my stomach. A hand touched my arm, and I turned to see Maria, another survivor I'd met through my advocacy work. "You've got this, Ella," she said, her eyes shining with encouragement. "We're all behind you." I took a deep breath and nodded. "Thanks, Maria. Let's do this." Inside, the hearing room was packed. I spotted familiar faces, other advocates, survivors, and supporters. As I took my seat at the witness table, I caught sight of a group of tech industry representatives, their expressions guarded. The committee chairman called the hearing to order, and I listened as experts testified about the rise in cyber-stalking cases and the challenges in prosecuting them. Finally, it was my turn. I approached the microphone, my prepared statement in hand. But as I looked out at the sea of faces, I set the paper aside. This wasn't the time for rehearsed words. This was the time for raw truth. "Distinguished members of the committee," I began, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I'm here today not just as a victim of cyberstalking, but as a survivor and an advocate. I'm here to put a face to the statistics you've heard today." I recounted my story, the terror of discovering I was being watched, the helplessness I felt as my privacy was violated, the long journey to reclaiming my life. As I spoke, I could see the impact on the committee members' faces. This wasn't just policy to them anymore, it was personal. The technology that allowed my stalkers to terrorize me is advancing every day, I continued. Our laws need to keep pace. This bill isn't about restricting freedom, it's about protecting it. The freedom to feel safe in our own homes, to live our lives without fear. As I concluded my testimony, a hush fell over the room. Then, slowly, applause began to build. I felt a lump in my throat as I saw Maria and other survivors standing, tears in their eyes. The questions from the committee members were thoughtful and engaged. Even some of the tech industry representatives approached me afterward, eager to discuss how they could be part of the solution. As I left the hearing room, I was swarmed by reporters. Ms. Thompson, do you think this bill will pass? What's your message to other stalking survivors? I paused, considering my words carefully. My message is simple. You are not alone. Your voice matters. And together, we can create change. The next few months were a blur of activity. I traveled across the country, speaking at conferences, giving interviews, and meeting with other survivors. Each story I heard strengthened my resolve. One evening, as I was preparing for yet another speaking engagement, my phone buzzed with a news alert. I nearly dropped it as I read the headline, "Anti-Stalking Bill Passes Senate." Tears of joy streamed down my face as I called Sarah to share the news. "We did it," I said, my voice choked with emotion. "It actually passed." "You did it, Ella," Sarah corrected gently. "Your testimony, your tireless advocacy, it made all the difference." As I hung up, I walked to the window of my hotel room, looking out at the city lights below. I thought about how far I'd come from that terrified woman who had discovered a mysterious photo on her phone. The journey had been painful, but it had led me here, to a place where I could use my experience to help others, to make a real difference in the world. My phone buzzed again, a text from Maria. "Just heard the news. Thank you for being our voice. Celebratory dinner tomorrow?" I smiled as I typed my reply. "Wouldn't miss it. Here's to new beginnings and safer futures." As I turned back to my speech preparations, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The bill's passage was a huge victory, but it was just the beginning. There was still so much work to do. Education, support for survivors, pushing for better enforcement of the new laws. But for the first time in a long time, I felt truly optimistic about the future. I had found my calling, my way to turn the darkest chapter of my life into a force for good. The next morning, I woke early, energized despite the late night. As I got ready for the day, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was different from the one I'd been a year ago, stronger, more confident, with a fire in her eyes that hadn't been there before. I picked up my phone, scrolling through the flood of congratulatory messages. One in particular caught my eye, from a young woman I'd spoken to months ago outside the courthouse. "Ms. Thompson, I just wanted to let you know that I finally got my day in court. Your courage gave me the strength to see it through. Thank you for showing me that we can turn our pain into power." I felt a warmth spread through my chest as I read her words. This was why I did what I did. This was the real victory, not just changing laws, but changing lives. As I headed out to face another day of interviews and meetings, I felt a lightness in my step. The photo I never took had set me on this path, but it no longer defined me. I was no longer just a victim, or even just a survivor. I was an advocate, a voice for change, a beacon of hope for others still trapped in the darkness I had escaped. And as I stepped out into the bright morning sun, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, I was ready to face them head on. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it was also full of promise. The shrill sound of my alarm pierced through the darkness, jolting me awake. My heart raced, remnants of a nightmare clinging to the edges of my consciousness. I fumbled for my phone, squinting at the bright screen. 3:17 a.m. With a sigh, I sat up, knowing sleep would elude me now. As I padded to the kitchen for a glass of water, I realized something. This was the first nightmare I'd had in weeks. A small victory, but a victory nonetheless. I smiled to myself, remembering my therapist's words. Healing isn't linear, Ella. Some days will be harder than others, but look for the progress no matter how small. The sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon when I laced up my running shoes. The streets were quiet as I set out on my morning jog, my breath creating small clouds in the cool air. As I ran, I let my mind wander, thinking about the day ahead. Today was a big day, my first date since everything. The thought sent a mix of excitement and anxiety coursing through me. Was I really ready for this? As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from my best friend, Liv. Good morning, sunshine. Ready for your big date tonight? Remember, no pressure. Just have fun and be yourself. You've got this. I smiled, feeling a wave of gratitude for Liv's unwavering support. She'd been my rock through everything, never pushing but always there when I needed her. Back at my apartment, I went through my morning routine, trying to keep the nervous butterflies at bay. As I was finishing my breakfast, my phone rang. It was Sarah, my former lawyer turned friend and fellow advocate. Hey, Ella. Sarah's cheerful voice came through the speaker. Just checking in. How are you feeling about tonight? I took a deep breath. Honestly, a little terrified, but also excited? Is that crazy? Sarah laughed warmly. Not crazy at all. It's perfectly normal to feel nervous. Just remember how far you've come. You're not the same person you were a year ago. Thanks, Sarah, I said, feeling some of the tension ease from my shoulders. You're right. I can do this. Of course you can, Sarah affirmed. Oh, and don't forget we have that speaking engagement at the university next week. The students are really looking forward to hearing from you. We chatted for a few more minutes about upcoming events and advocacy work before saying goodbye. As I hung up, I felt a familiar sense of purpose wash over me. My experiences had led me to this new calling, and even on days when the past felt heavy, I was grateful for the opportunity to make a difference. The day flew by in a blur of work and preparations. Before I knew it, it was time to get ready for my date. As I stood in front of my closet, I heard my phone ping with a new message. It was from Jake, my date for the evening. Looking forward to tonight. Hope you like Italian. See you at 7. I smiled, feeling a flutter of anticipation. Jake was a friend of a friend, someone who knew my story but didn't treat me like I was made of glass. We'd talked on the phone a few times, and his easy laugh and genuine interest in my advocacy work had put me at ease. At 6:55, I stood outside the restaurant, taking deep breaths to calm my nerves. I spotted Jake walking up, a warm smile on his face. Ella, he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. It's great to finally meet you in person. You too, I replied, surprised at how natural it felt. I hope you're hungry. I've heard great things about this place. As we settled into our table, the conversation flowed easily. We talked about our jobs, our families, our favorite books. It felt normal, wonderfully, beautifully normal. So, Jake said as we were finishing our main course, I have to ask, how do you do it? Turn such a traumatic experience into something positive? It's really inspiring. I paused, considering my words carefully. It wasn't easy, I admitted. There were days when I didn't think I'd ever feel safe or normal again. But I realized that I had a choice. I could let what happened define me, or I could use it to help others. And somehow, helping others helped me heal too. Jake nodded, his expression thoughtful. That's incredible, Ella. Really. The world needs more people like you. As we left the restaurant, still deep in conversation, I felt a lightness in my chest that I hadn't experienced in a long time. We decided to take a walk in a nearby park, the warm evening air filled with the sounds of laughter and distant music. Suddenly I froze. There, across the park, I thought I saw a familiar face. My heart began to race, old fears rushing back in an instant. Jake noticed my sudden tension. Ella, are you okay? I blinked, and the moment passed. The face I thought I'd seen was gone, lost in the crowd of park-goers enjoying the evening. "I'm okay," I said, taking a deep breath. "Just thought I saw someone I knew." Jake's eyes filled with concern. "Someone who?" I shook my head. No, not them. Just an old fear, I guess. "I'm sorry." "Hey," Jake said gently. "You have nothing to be sorry for. Want to talk about it?" We found a bench and sat down. As we talked, I felt the fear and tension slowly melt away. Jake listened without judgment, offering support without pity. By the time we stood up to leave, I felt grounded again, reminded of how far I'd come. "Thank you," I said as we walked back towards the restaurant where we'd left our cars. "For listening, for understanding." Jake smiled, his eyes warm. "Thank you for trusting me enough to share. You're an incredible person, Ella. I'd love to see you again, if you're interested." I felt a smile spread across my face. "I'd like that." As I drove home that night, my cheeks hurting from smiling so much, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for my friends, for the new purpose I'd found in my advocacy work, and for my own resilience. The road hadn't been easy, and I knew there would still be challenges ahead. But for the first time in a long time, I felt truly hopeful about the future. The next morning I woke to the sound of my alarm, feeling refreshed and energized. No nightmares, no middle-of-the-night panic, just a good night's sleep and the lingering warmth of a lovely evening. As I got ready for work, my phone buzzed with messages from Liv and Sarah, both eager to hear about the date. I smiled, typing out quick responses promising to fill them in later. At the office, I threw myself into my work with renewed vigor. We were planning a series of workshops for college students on digital privacy and online safety. As I reviewed the curriculum, I felt that familiar sense of purpose burning bright within me. Midway through the morning, my assistant poked her head in. "Ella, there's someone here to see you. Says she doesn't have an appointment, but, well, she seems pretty upset." I nodded, instantly alert. "Send her in, please." A young woman entered, her eyes red-rimmed and her hands shaking slightly. "Miss Thompson?" she said hesitantly. "I'm sorry to bother you. I didn't know where else to go." "It's no bother at all," I said gently, gesturing for her to sit. "Why don't you tell me what's going on?" As the woman, Sarah, she told me her name was, began to speak, I felt a familiar ache in my chest. Her story was painfully similar to my own. A stalker, escalating behavior, fear that consumed every aspect of her life. "I don't know what to do," Sarah finished, tears streaming down her face. "The police say they can't do anything unless he actually hurts me, but by then it might be too late." I leaned forward, my voice firm but kind. "Sarah, listen to me. What's happening to you is not okay, and it's not your fault. And you don't have to face this alone." For the next hour, we talked through her options. I connected her with a lawyer who specialized in stalking cases, gave her information about support groups, and walked her through some immediate steps she could take to enhance her safety. As Sarah was leaving, looking a little less frightened and a lot more determined, she turned to me. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything. I feel like I can breathe again." I smiled, remembering how it felt to finally see a way forward. "You're stronger than you know, Sarah. And remember, you're not alone in this fight." After she left, I sat back in my chair, a mix of emotions swirling through me. Sadness that there were still so many people going through what I had experienced. Anger at a system that often failed to protect the vulnerable. But also a fierce determination to keep fighting, to keep working towards a world where stories like mine and Sarah's would be the exception, not the norm. As the day wound down, I found myself reflecting on the stark contrast between my past and my present. The fear that had once consumed me was still there, a shadow in the background, but it no longer controlled me. Instead, it fueled my determination to make a difference. I thought about my date with Jake, about the easy laughter and genuine connection, about the moment of fear in the park, and how I had moved through it. I thought about Sarah, and all the others like her who needed support and understanding. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake. Had a great time last night, dinner again this weekend? As I typed out my reply, I felt a warm glow of happiness. Life wasn't perfect, and I knew there would still be challenges ahead, but I was facing them with strength, purpose, and hope. The woman I had become, survivor, advocate, friend, and maybe something more, was someone I was proud to be. The future, once so dark and frightening, now stretched out before me full of possibility, and I was ready to embrace it, one day at a time. The auditorium hummed with anticipation as I stood backstage, taking deep breaths to calm my nerves. 5 years had passed since that fateful day I found the mysterious photo on my phone, and here I was, about to address a crowd of hundreds at a national conference on cybersecurity and victim advocacy. You ready for this? Jake's voice came from behind me, warm and reassuring. I turned to see him holding out a bottle of water, his eyes filled with pride. I took the bottle gratefully, managing a smile. As ready as I'll ever be. Thanks for being here. Jake pulled me into a gentle hug. Wouldn't miss it for the world. You've got this, Ella. Go show them what a real survivor looks like. As I stepped out onto the stage, the bright lights momentarily blinding me, I felt a surge of strength. This was why I did what I did. This was how I reclaimed my story. Good morning, I began, my voice steady and clear. My name is Ella Thompson, and 5 years ago I woke up to find a photo of myself sleeping on my phone. A photo I never took. As I recounted my story, I saw the audience lean in, their faces a mix of horror, empathy, and determination. I spoke of the fear, the violation, the long journey to healing. But more than that, I spoke of hope. Today, I stand before you not just as a survivor, but as an advocate, a friend, a partner, I continued, my eyes finding Jake in the front row. The people who tried to break me? They're behind bars. But the woman they targeted? She's right here, stronger than ever. As I concluded my speech, the auditorium erupted in applause. I felt a wave of emotion wash over me. Gratitude, pride, and a fierce determination to continue this work. After the conference, as Jake and I were heading out, my phone buzzed with a flurry of notifications. I scrolled through them, my eyes widening. Jake, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Look at this. He peered over my shoulder, his eyebrows raising as he read the headlines. Congress passes landmark cyberstalking bill. New law gives teeth to online privacy protection. Advocates hail Thompson Act as major victory for stalking victims. The Thompson Act? Jake read, his voice filled with awe. Ella, they named it after you. I stood there stunned as the reality of what this meant sank in. Years of advocacy, countless speeches, meetings with legislators, it had all led to this moment. As we made our way home, my phone didn't stop buzzing. Messages from Sarah, Liv, fellow advocates, and even some of the survivors I'd helped over the years poured in, all celebrating this monumental victory. That evening, as Jake and I sat on our balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues, I felt a profound sense of peace. I never thought I'd be here, I said softly, leaning into Jake's embrace. There were days when I didn't think I'd survive, let alone thrive. Jake kissed the top of my head. You're the strongest person I know, Ella. You turned your pain into purpose, and look at what you've accomplished. As the night deepened, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. I thought of the terrified woman I'd once been, jumping at shadows and afraid to trust. I thought of the survivors I'd met along the way, each one teaching me something about resilience and hope. The next morning, I woke to the gentle buzz of my phone. It was a message from an unknown number. Ms. Thompson, you don't know me, but I wanted to thank you. Your story, your advocacy, it saved my life. I finally found the courage to leave my abuser. Thank you for showing me that there's life after trauma." Tears pricked my eyes as I read the message. This was why I did what I did. This was the real victory. As I got ready for the day, I paused to look at my phone. The lock screen showed a photo of Jake and me, laughing at some shared joke. A photo I had chosen to take, a moment of joy I had willingly captured. At the office, I was greeted with a round of applause from my team. Sarah, who had become my right hand in our advocacy work, enveloped me in a tight hug. "We did it, Ella," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "We really did it." I smiled, squeezing her back. "We've still got work to do, but yes, this is huge." As we settled into our morning meeting, discussing the implications of the new law and planning our next steps, I felt that familiar fire of determination burning bright within me. Midway through the day, I received a call from Congresswoman Martinez, the sponsor of the bill. "Ella," she said warmly, "I can't thank you enough for everything you've done. Your testimony, your tireless advocacy, it made all the difference." I felt a lump form in my throat. "Thank you, Congresswoman. I'm just grateful I could be part of this change." "We're not done yet," she continued, her voice filled with determination. "There's talk of taking this global, pushing for international standards on cyberstalking laws. Would you be interested in being part of that effort?" I felt a thrill of excitement run through me. "Absolutely, count me in." As I hung up, I noticed a notification on my computer. It was a reminder for my weekly video chat with my support group, other survivors who had become like family over the years. As their faces popped up on my screen, I felt a wave of affection wash over me. We had come so far together, supporting each other through the darkest times and celebrating every victory, no matter how small. "Ella!" Maria, one of the group members, exclaimed. "We saw the news. Congratulations!" I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. "Thank you, all of you. This victory belongs to all of us." We spent the next hour sharing updates, offering support, and planning for the future. As we signed off, I was struck once again by the power of community, of shared experiences turned into collective strength. That evening, as I climbed into bed next to Jake, I picked up my phone one last time. My finger hovered over the camera icon for a moment before I put the phone down, choosing instead to simply be present in the moment. "Everything okay?" Jake murmured, already half asleep. I snuggled closer to him, feeling safe and loved. "Everything's perfect," I whispered. As I drifted off to sleep, I thought about the long journey that had brought me here, the fear, the pain, the hard-won victories. I thought about the woman I used to be, and the woman I had become. The photo I never took had set me on this path, but it no longer defined me. I was more than my trauma, more than my past. I was a survivor, an advocate, a beacon of hope for others still trapped in the darkness I had escaped. And as I closed my eyes, I felt a deep sense of gratitude wash over me. For my strength, for the love and support that surrounded me, for the opportunity to make a difference in the world. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles to fight. But I was ready. Ready to face whatever came my way. Ready to continue the work of making the world a safer place for all. The future stretched out before me, no longer a source of fear, but a canvas of possibilities. And I was ready to paint it with colors of hope, resilience, and unwavering determination. As sleep finally claimed me, my last conscious thought was one of profound peace. The nightmare that had once consumed my life had transformed into a powerful force for change. And I, Ella Thompson, was exactly where I was meant to be. The photo I never took had started this journey. But the life I chose to live, that was the real story. And it was far from over.